Wandering through the great plains of life, things move fast, sometimes a blur. Don't you let this bumpy road separate you from the herd. And when you think the day is done, the sun is getting low, we're all looking for something rare, the great white buffalo. The Great White Buffalo Podcast with Ben Mayfield.
Welcome to another episode of the Great White Buffalo Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Mayfield. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get started into today's incredible episode, I just want to remind everybody to subscribe to our YouTube page. We have 117 subscribers as of today when I'm recording. Our goal for 2023 is to get to 1,000. So make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, the notifications. We really appreciate that. And if you're Apple and Spotify listeners, we love you and support you as well. But today, I'm so excited. This is, I feel like Captain Ahab right here because I've gotten the whale right here. This is a big one. In all of 2023, I've had a lot of friends. I've had some new guests, but this is the first one-on-one interview with a person who I love and admire. It's Mr. Tony Nunley. How are you, Tony?
I'm well, thank you.
Are you excited? Are you nervous? Is this your first podcast?
First podcast.
First podcast. Well, I was thinking about this the other day. We met on a car ride in your truck, and shout out to Chris Davis, and he was telling me, hey, you're going to ride with Tony Nunley on this youth trip, and I can't remember quite what we were doing. And I was trying to think, okay, how do I get to connect with him? How do I get to talk to him? Because I know he's kind of quiet.
We're going skiing, maybe? Are we going skiing?
It may have been a ski trip. Actually,
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. Yeah, we're going to West Virginia. Did we go to West Virginia?
I believe, I'm not sure, but I think it was a ski trip.
The ski trip.
It was West Virginia, yes.
Yeah, to Winter Place. And we connected on baseball. And because you're a huge Braves fan. And I will say this, I've never told you this before until we started recording. I did have to embellish my knowledge of baseball. I was like, oh yeah, what about that first baseman? And you'd be like, oh yeah, so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know.
So you lied.
No. I didn't say I knew who they were. But a little bit, yeah, I embellished a little bit, yeah. But that's how we first met. And I've gotten to know you over the years, and you're a fantastic guy.
I appreciate that.
I love it. And one of the things that I thought we could really talk about that kind of when I interview people on the podcast, I think they have things about them that maybe they don't feel like are, significant, but everybody's uniquely created on purpose. God uniquely made you to fulfill a purpose only you can fulfill. And when you think about your testimony, think about your life and what you've done, there are incredible things that people can learn from. And one of the things that I think is awesome is you were in the military, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And what made you want to join the military?
Well, I'd like to tell you it was part of some very elaborate plan that I had from the beginning, but really it was the opposite. It was the lack of no plan. I came from a family, mother and father were not educated in the sense of higher education. My dad actually was from Appalachia, part of Virginia, so coal miner, and graduated 6th grade.
Oh, wow.
Before he went into the military. And my mom was French and got out of high school. So in their eyes, for the children to graduate high school was the goal, just to get out of high school.
Wow.
So for me, growing up, education was never pushed. College was never pushed. College was never talked about. It was just get out of high school.
Yeah.
And so that's not a real high goal.
Yeah.
But at the time, they did the best they could. And so I was not motivated student. I was probably low B, high C student. Mm-hmm. Athletic, very involved in athletics, but didn't care too much about academics. And so when I got later in my high school years, I knew I had to do something, but I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Like a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably most people. Ironically, my dad was in the military. He wasn't infantry or anything like that. He was a regular Army guy, which was fine. But he had an album called The Ballad of the Green Berets, which is a very old album.
Yeah.
Written, sang and produced by a guy named Barry Sadler. And I would just take that album and listen to it with my headset. and I just loved it. And of course, it dramatizes the what a Green Beret was.
Is that the
inflates
fighting
it.
soldiers
Yes.
in the sky?
That's it. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, yeah.
Garrett Trooper, all these songs. So I just fell in love with the album and the ideal of that was cool being a Green Beret. So when I got to junior year of high school, senior year in high school, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. The only thing that really interested me at that time was I had two interests really. I had interest in biology, to marine biology. I really loved the eco type system. I grew up on Virginia Beach, and I was fascinated by the marshes and stuff like that. But then I soon found out to become a marine biologist and all that, it was a lot of schooling, and I knew that wasn't really in my cards. And I also worked with hearing impaired kids a lot.
What made you want to work with special needs?
I grew up in a church where there was a large population of deaf kids, hearing impaired, and we hung out together. So when you're 8, 9, 10 years old, and there's another boy who's 8, 9, 10 years old, and he can't hear you just figure it out, And so I picked up sign language, and as I got older, I'd spend all my summers working at camps for the hearing impaired, and that's what I loved. And so a lot of people thought, a lot of people that I went to church with thought that's what he's going to do. He's going to, go to college and become a special ed teacher and work with deaf kids, which I really enjoyed. That was a strong passion of mine. But both of that, working with deaf children or becoming a marine biologist, all involved going to college.
Yeah.
And parents didn't have money. I didn't have the grades.
There's no hopes. People listening to our younger audience, there is no hope scholarship at this point. It's expensive. Yeah.
So I thought, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to join the Army and be a Green Beret and get in 4 years, get college money, and then come out and go to college. That was my new plan. So I actually joined the Army my senior year in high school on the delayed program, and then went in. And what I didn't realize at the time is you can't join the Army off the street, what we call off the street, to be a Special Forces guy, a Green Beret. But they said you can join to be a Ranger. Well, I had no idea what a Ranger was. I didn't know.
They don't have a good PR system as far as music.
I mean, all I knew was the Green Beret album I listened to. The recruiter said, well, Rangers, they're kind of like Special Forces guys, and you can always be a Ranger, and then once you're in, you can volunteer to be Special Forces. I said, oh, okay, that's cool. I'll do that. So I had a contract, joined the Army to be a Ranger, thinking I would volunteer at some point to go Special Forces, and I had no idea what a Ranger was. And so that's basically how I got in the military, and not knowing, it's unlike today. Today, there's so much information at the kids' fingertips. If you want to know something, you just Google it. Back then, I couldn't Google Rangers. They weren't in the encyclopedia, and not many people knew who they were.
Well, and you're not from North Georgia, where, a lot of our listeners may be like, well, we know Camp Frank DeMero, we know a little bit. You're in Virginia.
Right.
So you don't have a Ranger base located near you.
Yeah.
And so you're 18. What year did you graduate?
81.
81. Okay, so you're in the 80s. You're joining the military. You have some passions. I didn't know you worked at summer camps, too. I thought that's pretty cool because Caleb and Jamie, shout out to, they both been on the podcast. They worked at summer camps, too, so I guess that's in the blood of the Nunleys.
Right.
I don't know if Robbie did at some point either, but
not that I'm aware.
So you're joining the military, and there's a lot of people that I know who, to this day, where sometimes they go to college, it doesn't quite work out. I know at least 4 or 5 people that go, all right, well maybe military is my option, and then they go to the military, and then a lot of them go to school later on. They kind of get their life together a little bit, but you're joining the Army. And do you immediately go Rangers, or is it?
No, it doesn't work that way. You go to basic training, and upon completion of basic training, since I had a Ranger contract, I went straight to airborne school. So, I graduated basic training maybe in the morning sometime. My mom and dad actually drove down for my graduation. I graduated, and then I had about 4 or 5 hours break, and then I had to sign into airborne school. So it was a really quick transition you sign into airborne school, and then you've got, I believe at the time it was 3 weeks was airborne school, and the part about that.
And what is airborne for those who don't know?
Airborne is where the military teaches you to jump out of a plane, with a static line that pulls your chute for you. And at the time when I was in basic training, when you run or you march, you always have cadence callers, people who will call cadences and stuff to keep you in step. And they're always just songs. Well, there are all these crazy cadences about these Rangers. And I'm like, man, who are these guys? What did I get myself into? They're singing all these cadences about all the I wouldn't say it was accurate information, but
you should YouTube some of the Army cadences because there's some funny ones out there.
So then I get to airborne school, and it's the exact same thing. We're in airborne school, we're running, we're marching. There's singing cadences and a lot about these Rangers and C-130s. And I didn't know what a C-130 was. It's an airplane, but I didn't know what it was at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was really ignorant to what I was getting into. I was just blindly going forward. I graduated basic, did very well in basic, went to airborne school, graduated airborne school, and from airborne school, which is at Fort Benning, both the basic and...
So your first time in Georgia?
Actually, I was born at Fort Benning, so... I wouldn't say it was my first time.
Okay. Well, there you go.
It's my first time since birth.
Well, and being 18 years old at the time, or 19, close to that, somewhere around there, jumping out of an airplane, was that when you went to I want to be a Green Beret or be a Ranger? Was that even in your scope to jump out of a plane? Because I feel like it's horrifying. It's not like just cool, let me just jump out of a plane. Whoa.
To be honest with you, it never bothered me. I didn't think airborne school was, the frightful world or whatever. It was just something to do to get to the Ranger unit that I had to do. So, graduated airborne school, and then I got sent to Savannah, which is where the 1st Ranger Battalion is, and that's where they send. There was a handful of us, I think, that went there, and you go through a program called RIP, which is RIP, which is the Ranger Indoctrinational Program. So you have to graduate RIP. If you graduate RIP and you make it to the end, then they'll send you to an actual unit within the battalion. So I went there and...
Now, Tony, I gotta interrupt you here, though. Was there a meeting at some point with some master generals of all right, we're going to name our program RIP? Like rest in peace, like they're gonna regret going through this, and then they're like, all right, but we have to make it make sense though, because we can't call it like RIP for that. So Rangers, what's it called? Indoctrination program. Someone in marketing that was pretty good. That was pretty genius. RIP, and you went through it.
Yeah, everybody goes through it. You have to graduate RIP
okay.
before you can get to an actual what we call a line company, which is the fighting unit, in the battalion. So I went through that in December. So I was still 18 years old and got to the unit. And, I do remember at that point being really scared, I mean, because then it was getting real and you started hearing more stories about what these guys do and stuff, and again, I didn't know. I was just going. And so it started to get a little bit more, I started to get a little bit more nervous. Mm-hmm. And I started saying to myself, okay, listen, you just survived 4 years, and then you're out of here and you go to college. Just survive 4 years and, get out of here and you go to college. I remember thinking that, so it wasn't the jumping out of the plane. It was the unit, because all the hype that was built up to what are these guys going to do? I didn't know what these guys were, what they did. And so even during RIP, and when you're in RIP, you're not exposed to what Rangers do. They're just trying to weed out the weak.
Well,
so it's all physical.
Is that kind of like the Navy SEALs have like that Hell Week? Is it similar to that? Like they put you through a lot of physical, like...
I can't talk about the SEAL stuff because I don't know.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you can't talk about the RIP classified information. No, but no. Is it a physical and a mental breaking? Like, where you doing like, we're waking up 4 hours of sleep, you're running 20 miles a day, like, I don't know.
RIP back then was very physical. It wasn't so much mind games as it was just purely physical. and trying to get you ready to be part of the unit. So
I
not
gotcha.
only they wanted to, just because you graduated basic training and just because you graduated airborne school, they're like, well, that that's great, but that's no big deal. We want to make sure you're physically fit before we send you forward to the unit. So you get 3 weeks to pass that. A lot of road marching, a lot of running, a lot of jumping. I mean, we jumped like 25 times in that 3 week period because they want you not to be, they want you to have experience jumping before they get into the unit. And then it's all about standard operating procedures, how to wear your rucksack, how to wear your gear, protocol, stuff like that. So it was, not everybody makes it through RIP, obviously. And so when you do make it through, then, they just attach you to one of the units. And I got attached in December of '81 to Alpha Company, 2nd Platoon. And, then your world starts.
So you're saying you graduated in May of '81 from high school,
June.
or June from '81 to December. You went through basic training, airborne school. Do you do AIT, or is that
That's part of basic.
that's part of basic?
It's the end of basic.
The basic, and then you went through RIP, and so by December, you're it's a very like a roller coaster of a year from end of high school, 4 years, blah blah, and now you're like, I'm the ranger, like or you're attached to ranger unit. I don't know if you get the full,
That's right.
like call yourself a ranger yet, but
That's right.
it is a huge transition in the last half of your
But
year.
it actually didn't start till August because I graduated in June. And then from June all the way through August, I was working at the hearing impaired camp.
Oh, okay.
So I was working as a deaf counselor up until that point.
And you were already physically in shape. You didn't like do any preparation of like.
I did not. I didn't. I was pretty athletic as a. I was not a professional athlete, but I was very athletic and very competitive, very busy. So I did not do anything. No.
So in December, you're attached to this unit. What do you? How do you go to the next? Like, what is the next part?
Well, at that point, it's about survival. I got there, lowest guy on the rank pole. You're the new guy, and so it's a whole world. It's kind of hard to describe, but I would say some people might use the word hazing. Some people would use indoctrination. Some people would use
A brotherhood.
seeing if people are ready. So at that point, I'm the new guy. So they put me in a position. I was a machine gunner, and so they told me what I needed to do, and I just every day you just learn that position, and you work with the group you're in, and then you just keep going every day, and every day you just want to survive. It's like because you are looked down upon until you prove yourself, basically. Even though you've been through basic AIT and all that, no one really cares about that. Now you're here, you need to prove yourself because the next step is going to Ranger School. And so when you have a bunch of privates and lower enlisted guys in a battalion, just because they're a Ranger battalion, they only get so many slots to send people to the school. So it's an order of merit. And so in my platoon, we would get so many slots for Ranger School for the year, and the platoon sergeant, the man in charge of the listed guys, would determine, okay, who's going next?
And how long did you have to wait before you were?
Well, that's a great question because it was different. It was interesting because there were a couple of guys that had been there before me. So I was kind of like lagging behind, not lagging. I was behind them in the order of merit or time there in the unit. But I went before them to go to Ranger School. So I'm not really sure. I mean, my leaders just must have thought he's fit, he's ready, he's doing the right thing, he's going. So I got to the unit in December. Really, it was Christmas break, so we really didn't do anything until January. And I got selected to go to Ranger School, and I started Ranger School May of that year, which is really fast. Some guys wait a year, 2 years before they get to go to Ranger School. And the reason that's important is because once you get your Ranger tab, now you treat it completely different. Once you go to Ranger School and you get that tab and you come back, they're like, okay, now you're human. We'll treat you normal.
We'll treat you normal.
So I actually started Ranger School. I had just turned 19, and I graduated.
That's gotta be one of the youngest people.
I graduated Ranger School in August. I was April, May, June. So I was 4 months past 18. I just turned 19.
You may be the youngest Ranger of all time.
It was pretty young. I wouldn't say, I'm sure it's not the youngest of all time, but it's pretty young to go to school that young. And I think it was a blessing because, again, I was still ignorant to a lot of stuff. I just was like running football. When you run up the middle, you just put your head down, go through, and hope you get to the other side.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing. I was just trying to survive.
I'm gonna sound stupid, but I'm ignorant to a lot of this stuff. Were you living on base? Like, do they provide housing? Like, are you living like in a barracks?
You live in a barracks, yeah.
Okay,
unless you're
barracks,
married,
okay.
then you can live off base and you can live with your wife in a house. But I lived in a barracks. I lived in basically it's like a
where is Fort
glorified
Stewart? Like
dorm.
Fort Stewart is in South Georgia, but not near Savannah. That's not where the Ranger Battalion is. Is there like a base in Savannah?
Yes, it's called Hunter Army Airfield.
Oh, okay. I've heard of that. I just didn't know that was in Savannah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you go to Ranger School. Still, like, you probably didn't have any relatives that were, Rangers that you could ask. You didn't have Google. So what was presented to you for Ranger School? Which, for those who don't listen, I maybe misspeak, but Rangers is classified as Special Forces, right?
Special operations.
Or Special Operations. Okay, so Special Operations. So it is a big deal to go to Ranger School. It's not like it's just, anything that you could just
Well,
do.
before you go to Ranger School, before a battalion sends you to Ranger School, you got to get recommended by your chain of command,
Okay.
And then they select you, and then you go to pre-Ranger.
Oh, okay.
So it's another 4-week school. It's held in-house. It's held in Savannah. It's held at Hunter Army Airfield, what we call an in-house school. It's not an official Army school. It's just a program taught by the battalion to make sure the people are ready and teach them what they need to know when they get to Ranger School, so they're prepared.
Because the slots are limited at Ranger School, and if you're
Right.
going to waste one of our slots, we're not going to send you.
Right.
I
So
got
you
you.
pass pre-Ranger, and then you go to Ranger School.
The people that you went with, that you said you got ahead of in the class, I always see like the seniors versus, the freshmen. Did they go to that pre-op with you?
No.
So they didn't do that pre-Ranger School with you? Because I
No.
thought that's what I was thinking, was maybe you just did really well at the pre-Ranger School, and they're just like, oh, this guy's ready.
No, the two guys that were ahead of me in seniority, I think one of them actually went to Ranger School or started Ranger School while I was in Ranger School. So he wasn't too far behind me.
Okay.
And then I think the other guy, he actually went maybe when I graduated and I came back, because we ended up being pretty close graduates to each other, maybe within a year of each other.
Okay.
So
Well, and I'm also, if I ask anything, I always feel like, our listeners, I don't know if I'm about to get like the CIA or the NSA's listening to our conversation. I'm not trying to expose special operations, but I know there's 3 phases of Ranger School, which I think that's right. There's 3 phases
currently, yes.
currently. So wait,
At
was
one
there?
point they tested 4, but
Oh,
they're back to 3 now.
well, when you started Ranger School, was there 4 or was there
3?
3? There was 3 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what was that experience like? Like, was it the most brutal physically? Was there a mental element? Like what got you through? Is it just because you're 19 and kind of dumb? Like, all right, whatever. Like, I'll just do.
Well, a lot of people, everybody has their own opinion of Ranger School, but Ranger School is a leadership tool. Ranger School basically is a leadership school. That's why the Army send people there, because they want to develop leaders. They want to see how leaders react under stress. So basically, it's just a leadership school. I mean, you do a lot of stuff in Ranger School, like skill work wise, but it's nothing to make you better at that skill. It's just to test your leadership under stress. So you could go to Ranger School and the skill could be how to make ice cream, but you're going to make ice cream with no sleep, no food, outside in the rain, lightning, and all kinds of other scenarios. Now let's see how you make ice cream. No one really cares how you make ice cream, but it's how you how you do in this process while you're no sleep. Everybody else has no sleep. Your ice cream team doesn't have sleep. So how are you going to motivate them to make ice cream when they've had no sleep, they've had no food, and it's raining and all this other stuff? So
Golly,
it's
yeah.
all about. It's really not really about what you learn in the skill wise of Ranger School, but it's how you react to leadership skills. So what you learn about yourself in Ranger School is, what are my weak points? What are my strong points? And how do you motivate people to do things that don't want to do it?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Did you discover some of those strengths of yours and weaknesses of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I had the hardest time in Ranger School with the sleep, because I wrestled all through. I wrestled from like eighth grade all the way through high school. So I say that because not eating, I was used to. I knew how to not eat, and I knew how
To make weight, yeah.
and I knew how to survive by not eating. But I always got my sleep. So in Ranger School, not having sleep, that was my Achilles heel. That's what I had to work on the most, was how to deal with my sleep. It really wasn't the food, although you're definitely hungry. It's how do I deal with the no sleep portion.
Because that makes you foggy with your critical thinking. Because I imagine that stressful scenario that they're trying to get you to make leadership decisions and how to bring people together is when there's bullets singing by your head, and it's life or death situations. You have to kind of simulate that without actually shooting at somebody, of making the right decision, making the good calls, bringing the unit together, because you're going to have stressful military operations, and so that's why they're trying to teach y'all.
They want to see how far can you bend and not break, and they want to see what you do. What do you do?
And not break.
Because Ranger School is really a team effort in a lot of sense. So everybody, every day, not everybody, but each day there's a certain amount of graded, quote unquote, positions. And you have to pass a graded position before you can go to the next phase. And you only get about 3 opportunities in a phase to pass your patrol, what we call patrols. So if I'm in charge, okay, and it's near the end of the phase, and I'm still needing to pass, I need to go to Florida, but the majority of my group, they've already got their goes. They really don't care, or do they? I mean, that's what you got to figure out is, okay, they know they're going to Florida, so how do you get them to do what they're supposed to do, be part of the team, so you can get your go? So It's all about the teamwork aspect of it.
Absolutely.
And, that's when, that's why peer reporting in Ranger School is so important. At the end of every phase, you get to peer evaluate. So if there's somebody in the group that's not a team player, you can rate them low. And even though they've got to go, if their peer reporting is low enough, they will put them back. They'll recycle them.
Wow. Do they talk to them why they send them back, though?
Oh, yeah, you get told.
Okay.
You got peer reviewed, so.
Yeah. Do you think, I'm just trying to think, like, in those situations, is there a part where because I know, like, from things I've seen online with the Navy SEALs, the Green Beret, or trying to think of some other special operations type units, but through all this, they put you through that stressful, situation. But is there a part where they do like a skills teaching where it's not like wake up at the crack of dawn, no, you have 2 hours of sleep, or is there a point where they go, all right, let's teach you some stuff? Like, is there a learning aspect of like how to do drops or do tactics, or, if we're trying to take over a compound or drop into a hot zone, how do we do that? Like, is there a learning phase?
So I think you're asking me 2 questions.
Okay.
Do they teach you how to combat the lack of sleep and the food and the stress?
Yes.
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I've ever had a class on how to combat stress, and you just do it.
Okay.
You either do it or you don't.
Do they teach you the other part of it?
Yeah. Now
then?
the other part of that,
Okay.
you're talking about tactics.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But again, Ranger School is not about how well you do your tactics.
Okay, it's not. That's what I was.
You are being graded on your particular mission, but it's more about how you led. It's not really whether the
okay.
mission was a success, but how did you put together the plan? How did you incorporate your leaders? How did you motivate them to pull security even though they just want to sleep? So it's more about leadership than it is about accomplishing the mission.
Wow.
I mean, because if you look at a raid, a ambush, which is a typical mission for Ranger School students to do,
Right.
they do not look good. They do not look good. But you can't look at that. You got to look at what the evaluators are looking at, because they know that guy, he hadn't had but one meal a day for the last 10 days and he hasn't slept much, and they've been rained on and they've been wet and they've been cold and they've been all of this, but yet he's trying to figure this out, how to make this mission work and accomplish it with his team. So that's what it's about.
Wow,
Now, when you get out of Ranger School and you go back to your Ranger unit, that's where they're going to teach you tactics and
Okay.
other stuff like
Things
that.
like that.
Yeah.
Was there? I think this is when I'm listening to this, and I know people who are listening. Or at least I am. I'm fascinated by this stuff. I could probably spend 4 hours asking you 1,000 questions. But one of I think the key ingredient that we can all take away is there was probably a moment, if not multiple moments, where you're like, I can just quit this crap right now. I want my sleep, or some people's like, I want my food, or I'm wet. I don't like wet socks and my feet are wet and they're probably nasty looking and I don't know these guys. This is a stressful situation. Why am I doing this? What was the heart or the mindset? Like what said, you know what? I'm going to dig deeper than I've ever dug before and move forward. Was it faith? Was it just
I think it was probably fear.
fear?
Yeah. Fear of going back to my unit, not having graduated Ranger School. I did not want to do that. That's not looked upon highly. So I think it was the fear of not making it, and at that point, again, I'm 19.
Right,
So
that's true.
I really can't say I never quit anything because I didn't really do anything other than sports. So, this was a pretty good test of me, but it was more about, it's graduating was a big mark. And so I just knew I needed that mark to go to the next step. I needed to graduate. That was my next. I needed to get over this hurdle, and so whatever it takes, I need to do it. And so the fear of going back was not an option.
Well, and I think that's a very valid answer because, sometimes we associate fear with, they're scared or fear of failure or whatever it may be. But like fear in a way is healthy because I think even like when I was getting my doctorate, which I'm not comparing to Ranger School at all, but just in the sense of there was moments where I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I don't want to write a 150-page paper. Like, this is so stupid. But then I started thinking like, well, then I have to tell people that I quit and that, that all these people who are looking up to me to graduate and supported me. And then I'm like, okay, well, actually, I gave up. I didn't really want to do it anymore. And that fear of like kind of letting them down was like, well, you're not going to do that then. You're actually going to dig deep and move forward so you don't have to even cross that bridge. And so I think I think fear can be healthy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Fear is very healthy. Going back to I don't want to digress from what you're talking about.
yeah, go ahead.
But going back to the airborne thing, jumping out of planes, you have to fear jumping out of planes to an extent, but you can't let the fear control you. Because I think if you lose fear, you lose the respect for what you're doing. And I always told myself, if ever I got in an airplane and I wasn't a little nervous about jumping and I wasn't a little fearful, not that it's going to just overtake my emotions, but if I didn't have that little bit of fear in me, then I needed to stop jumping. Because at that point, you lose respect for what you're about to do, and you're either going to kill yourself or you're going to kill somebody else. So you have to respect it, and be fearful of it, but don't let it control you.
Wow. That's some wise words, Tina.
So that's why, in Ranger School is the same way. The fear may have controlled me at that point because I did not want to go back without the tab. That was not an option in my mind. There was no other option, because in the Ranger world, if had I gone back without the tab, it's a possibility that they would have sent me one more time, but I would have been really low on the rank. I mean, there had been tons of people go before me before I would get a second chance. So that meant life would be really hard for a few more years until I got a chance to go back. Or they can just kick you out of the unit. You know, a Ranger unit's a volunteer unit. So unlike the regular Army, if you're assigned a soldier, you really can't kick that soldier out unless you have a lot of grounds, counseling, they did this, and then you can kick them out. But in the Ranger unit, it's a little different. If they don't make the standard, then you move on down the road and you go to a regular Army unit. So I didn't want to do that. So that fear again is, coming back without the tab was not an option. So whatever it took it was going to take it.
To get the mission accomplished. And one of the things that I went to back this fall, I went to call it a walk to Emmaus, and they take away, you don't have a cell phone and you can't wear a watch, because I always wear a watch with, the time and the date and all that. At Ranger School, do you have a perception of time?
You do have a perception of time because everything is time driven.
Okay, so like today's a Tuesday.
You don't know about a day. You're really not conscious of a day so much because no one really cares what day it is. A day is a day.
But 0 to 500.
Everything you do is time driven. So you might get put in charge, and you might have a mission to accomplish at 1700, 5 o'clock p.m. or 2000, 8 o'clock at night. And so then you have to back plan what do you have to do in time increments to make that happen. So yeah, everybody has a watch and everything is time driven.
Okay. So I didn't know if there was
a watch in Ranger School is actually very important because everything is done by time.
Okay.
Even
all right,
when,
scratch what I said. You do need a watch at Ranger School. Got it.
I mean, even when you're pulling, if in the rare opportunities when you get to sleep, you might get to sleep 5 minutes and your buddy gets to sleep 5 minutes, but while he's sleeping, you got to be awake. So, you're watching your watch because you don't want to shortchange him 5 minutes and you want to get your 5 minutes. So every little bit counts. So a watch is pretty important.
Okay. So you do have a watch. And did you know, this is a kind of an off the wall question, but did you know hey, tomorrow's the last day of Ranger School? Did you know that day was coming up, or was it kind of like one day all right, hey, y'all passed, you're done? What?
No, we knew. Everybody pretty much knew when the last day was.
Okay.
And when the last patrol was, and that was kind of a somber day because the guys that had not passed their patrols knew they weren't not going to have any more opportunities to go. So you knew what the last day was.
How many patrols do you have to pass?
You have to pass. It's changed over the years. When I went through, you had to pass 50% to move forward.
And
if you got 4 patrols, you had to pass 2.
Oh, okay. Wow. Because that could be super. You just went through all this, and let's say you had 4 patrols and you passed 1, and you didn't pass. I guess you would fail 3, which is kind of, is a write on the wall. That you're not going to pass it, but
and what's hard about it is, when I went through again, times have changed, things are different. So we had a 10-day period where you're in the woods for 10 days, and you get patrols every day for 10 days, and that was really 10 days is a long time to be out there with no sleep and lack of food, and wears on you. So unfortunately, the guys who were struggling to pass their patrols, if a guy was, say there was a guy at 3-0 on patrols or 4-0 on patrols, and it's day 8 of a 10-day field training exercise, well, you're not going to give him a patrol because he's going forward regardless. So you're going to give the patrols to the people who have not passed.
Okay.
But you're giving them, you're feeding them these graded positions at the very end of a 10-day exercise when there's absolutely no energy, no motivation, and everybody's done.
Yeah.
So it makes it even harder for the graded person to pass, in a sense.
Wow.
Because he's just really fighting an uphill battle.
So after this, I guess you got your patrols. You're like, okay, I passed my patrols. What happens when you graduate? Did your parents come? Is there a graduation ceremony, or is it?
I'm really not sure what happened at that point. I don't have a memory.
You don't remember something 40 years ago?
I remember Do what?
So you don't remember something that happened 40 years ago? Come on now.
So I remember going from the first phase, which is Fort Benning.
Okay.
I remember that phase, and then going to the mountains, and I remember the mountain phase.
And that's still
That's still in
Dahlonega?
Dahlonega.
Oh,
And then when you
nice.
graduate the mountain phase, we jumped into Florida, and we did the
Oh,
swamp.
what's-
We
oh,
did
yeah.
the swamp phase.
Oh, okay. I
And
didn't
so
know
that's
that.
the last phase. And then when you graduate, or not when you graduate, but when you complete the swamp phase or the Florida phase, you go back to Fort Benning, basically get cleaned up, and you graduate.
So which phase? I know phase 3, the swamp, is the last one. So you could argue I'm the sleepiest, tiredest, hungriest by that phase. But is the mountain phase harder than the swamp phase? Like,
Well, that's an interesting question. Everybody will probably answer that differently depending
Okay.
upon their person. For me, a lot of people do not like the mountain phase because of the terrain. It's so hard to walk up the mountains with all the gear,
oh, that's
and
true. It's really heavy.
that just really kicks your butt. And it's colder. Now I went in the summer, but it's all the walking that really hurts people. So for me, though, I would not say I enjoyed the mountains, but I would say the mountain phase for me, I liked better than the Florida phase, because in the Florida phase, you're in the swamps, and
Boo, swamps.
your feet are just wet all the time.
Gosh,
And that
wet
bo-
feet, Tony. I cannot do that.
That
Ooh.
bothered me more than being in the mountains, and so to me, I had a harder time with the Florida phase.
Do you get blisters and like your feet just peel off skin?
Oh, yeah, you definitely, and it stinks pretty good too.
Yeah.
And you get to the point where it's hard to walk because your feet are just so stiff.
You ever shoot an alligator?
Never shot an alligator.
Not a real ranger. Come on now. If you're not hunting down alligators in the swamp, is it the what's the big? Is it not the Everglades? What's the thing that's in Florida? The one. Is it Everglades? Is that what it is?
And you have the Okefenokee in Georgia.
No, Okefenokee. Did y'all do any Okefenokee?
No, we stayed in the Florida, we stayed in the Panhandle of Florida, which is near Destin, Fort Walton Beach. That's the Florida phase.
That's the Florida phase. Mm-hmm. So you go through the swamp. Ugh. But that kind of makes me want to ask the question, and maybe I'm very ignorant. I'll describe this and tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, because we're listening to this experience, we're listening to Ranger School, the stress of the leadership, and you learn tactics later on, but this is the very stressful part. What do Rangers do? Like, what is their purpose? And this, I'm going to describe this, and I could be completely wrong. So, for all of our Rangers listening, you can just roll your eyes at me. But from what I understand, and maybe I stole this from you many years ago when we talked, is the Rangers' purpose, like why they are special operations, is they are they secure a landing zone for everybody else. That they're the first in, they lead the way, which I think is their motto, maybe not. They come in, they go, all right, we'll drop in, hot zone, we'll take over this landing zone, and that way everybody else who's not as awesome as we are as Rangers can then come in and then with a bigger military. I don't know if that's accurate, but what do Rangers do?
Well, it's evolved. It's changed.
Okay.
When I first got there, I got there, and again, like I said, in 81, and you understand the Rangers didn't stand up until 74. So from 74...
What do you mean they didn't stand up?
There was no Ranger unit, again, till 1974.
Oh, that's when it first started.
So
Okay.
it started up in 1974 from World War II. So those first few years, everybody's trying to figure out what we do, what we're going to do, how are things looking. So I was there at a pretty early time.
Less than 10 years, yeah.
At a pretty early time in the Ranger history of what we're doing. And when I went there, we were basically the supreme light infantry of the world. We were going to be better at light infantry tactics. That was our goal than anybody in the world. So shoot, move, communicate, jump out of planes, do raids, do ambushes, all that stuff. That's what we were going to do, and we were going to do it better than anybody.
Okay.
So that was our focus. Then what you mentioned, the airfield seizure came around as an introduction to the Rangers doing that.
Airfield seizure.
Right.
Okay,
And so that evolved to be more of a primary mission.
let's go. I got one.
And so now, I really don't want to go out and say what they're doing now.
Okay.
But I would say they're still doing very important stuff. I'm sure they're still doing stuff that involve airfields and working with other special operation units. But everybody has kind of expanded their mission a little bit. Everybody's kind of doing more than one thing.
And once again, and I totally get that. We can't go too far into it. Do the Rangers, how is inter cooperation among special operations? Like, do like Rangers work with Green Beret? Do they work with SEALs? Do they work with? I'm trying to think of, or do y'all just work with like the regular Army?
Well, like any competitive sport, there is a competition in the special operations community between different units, whether it be the SEALs and the Special Forces guys and the Rangers, and then, you got an Air Force unit there. You got different units that are considered special operations. So there is a lot of competition, and trash talk, if you will, between those units.
Let's go.
But everybody understands that's just internally.
Yeah.
Everybody has the same mission, and no one's trash talking another special operations unit to another country. We would never do that. We're just amongst ourselves, basically.
Right. A healthy competition.
A healthy competition.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, because ultimately we're Americans. We're U.S. Team America.
That's right.
Absolutely. Now, with that, with the Rangers, so would you consider yourself a Ranger in 81, or when you got your Ranger tab in 82?
That's another good question. I consider myself, I don't know at what point. I think personally, I consider myself a Ranger when I got to the unit.
Okay. And you pass, so I think that if you hadn't passed Ranger school, okay, maybe. But since you passed, it kind of goes, I started at 81,
Yeah.
to that.
I think at that point, I probably considered myself a Ranger.
I got you.
And then definitely more so when I graduated Ranger school.
I got you. And other people who are not Rangers can go to Ranger school to get the Ranger tab.
That's correct.
But they are not and this. I know this is slightly confusing, but I'm a military kid, so I feel like I got a little better understanding. In case you didn't know, my dad also served. What's up, Dad? But you can go to schools to get a tab, but there's also a battalion that you're a part of. So, like, you're part of the Ranger battalion and got your Ranger tab, went to Ranger school, but you could have a guy, I don't know, in the Marines or something, go to Ranger school, get permission to go to Ranger school, get Ranger certified, get a tab, but they are not part of the Ranger unit.
That's correct.
That is a correct statement?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's go.
Yeah. Ranger school, again, it goes back to what I was talking about, Ranger school being a leadership school. So it's not just for the Ranger units. It's for the Army to send their people to become better leaders. So any combat arms was what we would call it, a job skill in the military, can get a slot, most of the time can get a slot to send somebody to Ranger school to pick up this leadership skill.
Right.
And when they graduate, they get to wear the black and gold tab on their uniform. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go to a Ranger unit. They go back to their unit and they're Ranger qualified,
Right. Which is impressive.
Yeah, and that's what the purpose of the school is to raise the standard of leaders in the Army. If you send a handful of people from your unit to Ranger school and they come back, the goal would be that they would help raise the standard of your unit and increase the leadership of your unit.
Can they call themselves a Ranger?
I'm not going to say
gray area.
What that terminology. We have our own little thing in house, but
I got you.
I would say they probably do.
Okay. Now, I did not realize they started the Ranger unit in 74. You're there in 81. It's only 7 years later, so less than 10 years total. And how long were you in the Ranger? Like you started in 81. When did you become a non-Ranger, or when did you not become part of the Ranger Battalion?
When did I leave the Ranger Battalion?
Mm-hmm.
After the Panama invasion. So that was 90.
Okay, well we went through a lot. Okay, before we get there, because I want to I want to get into that, is your Green Beret dreams after Ranger School. Did you try to pursue the Green Beret thing, or is that kind of like, I've already
You're
done
pretty
Ranger?
good at this podcast stuff. You remember things.
Oh, I do.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. Well, I got to the point after I was in 4 years, I was up for reenlistment. And at the 4 year mark it was pretty important because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I know I loved doing what I was doing, which was being a ranger. And at that point, 4 years, Grenada had already happened, so I was past the Grenada invasion. I'd already participated in Grenada.
Wait, you took part in Grenada?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, first of all, Tina, you can't just pass through huge military operations like that. So, what year was Grenada? 82? 83?
Yeah, October of 83.
And I was not born, so what was Grenada about? Do you know?
Well, let me go back to what I was saying.
Okay.
You asked a question about my special or my Green Beret dreams.
Yeah.
I very much slowly fell in love with being a ranger. And the ideal of going to Green Berets or being a Green Beret was slowly fading in my head. Now, there were a lot of guys in the unit who would transfer over and become a Special Forces guy because there was a lot they did that was attractive. One, they get to grow their hair out. And, they were a little bit, I would say, more casual than we were. So that was pretty attractive. But I really loved what I was doing. And at the 4 year mark, I said, all right, I got to reenlist. If I don't reenlist, then I got to go back home. Well, I really didn't have anything to go home to, so I thought about it for a while, thinking. I did have my mom and dad there. I don't want to say that. I want to say I'd have to go to school.
Right.
I didn't have a place to go and live.
Career path.
I'd have to enter college at 22, having been independent now for 4 years on my own, completely independent. And I didn't want to do it. I enjoyed my independence, and I was like, no, this is what I'm going to do. And so it was I actually didn't reenlist until maybe 2 or 3 days before I was supposed to get out. And that's when I made the decision, no, I'm going to reenlist and stay.
Is it another 4 years? Is it 4
Well,
years?
at that point, I knew I was probably going to make it a career. I knew if I went past the 4 year mark, I said, okay, well, if I'm going to go past 4 years, then I'm just going to stay in for 20 and figure this out.
Oh, do you sign for 20 years?
No, but you just kind of make a decision. You can make a decision at any point. I'm going to do another 4 years and another 4 years.
Another
or
4.
So
I
forth.
got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay, well that's
At that
a
point,
big moment then.
Well, I was 22, so another 4 years puts me at 26. So do you get out at 26 and then start a new life? That's kind of tough. So 22 was a critical decision-making point for me to get out or not get out, and I decided to stay.
You're absolutely right, because 22 is young enough where you're like, all right, I can go maybe by 26, I have a degree, I can go be a teacher, or I can go do this or do that. So that is a critical moment where you're like, all right, well, what is my career path going to be? And honestly, I've fallen in love with the Ranger School, the Ranger Battalion, and serving, in this role. So I'm going to stay here for 4 more years. So that is a really important keynote part of Tony Nunley's story. And so in 85, you sign on. And that point, 85, you sign on for like 4 more years, right?
Yes.
And then you decide that Green Beret is not quite your thing anymore, because you kind of got into it. And you get to wear, was it the beige berets? No, Rangers wear like berets too?
Black.
Oh, yeah, black? Oh, okay. Which, black is cooler than, green. Like, ugh. Anyways, I'm trying to start trash for all my Green Beret friends. I don't have any, I don't think. Is Green Beret, is that Army as well?
Yes.
Delta Force Army?
Yes.
Is Delta Force a thing at this point?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know. Delta Force to me is even like super secretive. We won't get into it. But back to Grenada though. All right, because that is a conflict, a military conflict. It wasn't like we didn't go to war. Is that the one where they like kidnapped people in a school?
Well, Grenada is, as you know, a small island and in the Caribbean, and there was a coup that took place where the military took over the government, killed the leader.
Oh wow!
There were also rumors that the Grenadians were being backed by the Cubans, and that they had this big airfield.
Oh, this is Cold War era, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Cubans were going to influence the Grenadians to take this airfield, turn it over to them. So if the Cubans did that, then that meant Russia would have a place to land planes. So from what I understand, President Reagan at the time was concerned with the military coup taking place. There were American students on the island in a medical school called True Blue Medical Campus, I believe, and they were going to medical school down there. And he feared for their lives, and he also did not like the idea of the Cubans backing the Grenadians and the possibility of taking the airfield and using it for other reasons. So then he alerted the government, he alerted the Pentagon to come up with something to get the students, basically get the American students out of there safely.
That's the primary mission. The secondary is preventing Cuba and Soviet Russia having a big airfield.
The country was in complete disarray. I mean, the military was taken over, and they assassinated the leader. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And at that point in '83, I'm assuming this is the first Ranger military operation, right? I mean, because at that point y'all were pretty young.
It was the second.
Okay.
There was another one called Operation, I believe it's called Eagle Claw, which was
awesome name.
When the Iranian hostages were held, and the government was going to try to rescue the Iranian hostages.
Yeah, in 77?
79.
Or 79? Is that what Jimmy Carter?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
I didn't know the Rangers were involved with that.
We had a company involved, and that didn't go well. They never really executed the operation because of, for several reasons, but the biggest reasons was a helicopter got damaged and couldn't land and take off, and then it was a crash. So they withdrew, and they never did complete that operation. So that would really be technically the first time Rangers were into action, even though they didn't actually go all the way through.
Go all the way through.
Yeah.
So so Grenada would be the second, and so this was the first, or I say the second time, but really the first, I guess, successful. And why were the Rangers chosen? I guess because of the airfield.
Yeah, at that time, there were two Ranger units. There was one in Savannah, and there was one in Washington State, which is the 2nd Ranger Battalion. And so they're complete opposite ends of the country.
Yeah, East Coast, West Coast, yeah.
The airfield needed to be taken over so that we could land airplanes to rescue the students and bring peace or control to the country. So that was in our wheelhouse. Airfield, taking over the airfield.
Yeah.
So that's why we got the call.
And if I ask a question, obviously you don't have to answer it. But so were you part of it? Like, were you like one of the ones that deployed from Savannah to go take over the airfield?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Did y'all get some light fire?
We did, yeah. And it's the first time that I don't want to even say the date because that would be inaccurate, but it's the first time, this is what I was told, that anyone has jumped out of a plane at 500 feet while being shot at since maybe, I don't think it was done during Vietnam. I could be corrected on that. I do not believe it happened in Vietnam. I do not believe it happened in, I think or
Korea.
I think maybe Korea was a possibility or something. But it was a long time anyways. That's the point. It was a very, very long time since American soldiers had jumped out of a plane at 500 feet, that's the combat level. We never jump out of planes at 500 feet. The lowest we'd ever jump in training is 1250. Because that gives you room to react case your main doesn't open. It gives you room to react, pull your reserve, and take the procedures, to fix it.
Yeah, but so I'm using my hands for all you watch on YouTube because this is how I'm going to describe this. Is you're in there, and I guess since you're lower to the ground, it's harder for them to shoot at you. Where if you're up here, they can shoot just up and have, I guess, greater time to shoot troopers. So lower to the ground gives you less time in the air, closer to the ground to combat.
Yeah,
Is that right?
It absolutely gives you less time in the air, and you might think it's easy to hit a body under a parachute while they're moving through the sky, but it's really not that easy.
Yeah,
I mean that's pretty hard to do. The other part of flying low was the airfield had anti-aircraft guns, and the anti-aircraft guns were on a big hill overlooking the airfield, and the plan was to get the planes low enough that they could not lower the guns that low to shoot to the airplanes.
Oh,
so that was another reason why it was to jump low.
To jump low. Yeah. When people try to talk about shooting, I always go, well, when you get a basketball and you shoot a 3, do you make it? I'm like, well, no. It's like, well, do you think you can shoot a gun 500 yards away and hit it? Like, no, you probably can't. If you can't shoot a basketball, you probably can't shoot a gun. At least accurately, because some people have like this misperception because of movies that like you shoot a target, it just automatically just hits it, and it's not super. It's still scary to be shot at. Don't get me wrong, but it's a little harder than you think.
And that's the jump into Grenada. There's a whole lot that went on before the jump that you could spend hours on, the confusion, the chaos, because this was the first time the military had an operation with joint services, and it did not go well. The Army not communicating to the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, the SEALs. There were a lot of people involved, but at this point, we really didn't have a common headquarters to control us. So it was really, really difficult to get things done and to communicate. And that was a lesson learned from Grenada. So on the way down in the flight, going down there, we were told, okay, we're not going to jump. You're going to air land. And then all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, you might get the word, okay, you're going to jump. And then, it goes back and forth because the information just kept changing. Mm-hmm. So that was very, very confusing. But we ended up, the formation of the airplanes going in changed drastically because you load an airplane based upon where you want people to be on the ground when they jump. So there's certain people at certain parts of the airfield. So you front load the airplane with X amount of people that do a certain job, and then after them is going to jump be somebody else. So each airplane is loaded like that. So when they get on the airfield, they're close to who they need to be. But in this situation, that totally didn't happen. The first 3 aircrafts just turned around because they were receiving too much gunfire, and so the 3rd aircraft ended up becoming the first aircraft, which was my aircraft, to jump. And then
so you're the first ones to actually hit the ground.
I believe our aircraft was the first one to jump. 3, 4 aircrafts, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all came.
Which goes back to Ranger School, which says, hey, when everything messes up and it's super stressful, are you going to have that leadership skill to continue the mission? I mean, is it not right? I mean, because
that's a nice tie-in.
Because if you were to land there and go, well, the first 3 planes didn't land, so we're going back up. It's like, well, no, you don't get to choose that.
Well, and up to this point, we're, okay, so 83, I'm what, 20, 18, 19, 20, I'm 20. And none of us have been shot at before, and so we don't know what it's like. We don't know what we're getting ourselves into. The information we've gotten at that point has been pretty sparse. So, and we've gone on a lot of, quote unquote missions, and they're not real. They're just training, but they try to hype you up for them. So we some of us, maybe in the back of our mind, we're thinking, yeah, this is a big drill. We're really not going. We're going to jump out and we're going to be at Fort Stewart, probably someplace, That was not the case. I mean, when we jumped out, you could see the green tracers. Americans fire with red tracers, and the Soviet Union countries, they fire with green tracers. So you could see the green tracers coming at you, and that's the first, oh yeah, this is real.
I'll say
this is-
one
this
bad
is-
word. That's an oh shit moment.
Yeah, that's when you realize, okay, this is happening.
Yeah.
And then for me personally, I get on the ground, and first of all, luckily to get on the ground alive and not be hurt and have all my stuff.
Yeah.
But then I look around and we're not seeing anybody because the other airplanes didn't jump, and so you kind of. I was very nervous, linked up with a buddy of mine who was a higher position than me, and we were like, "Where's everybody else?" I don't know. And then all of a sudden we looked, and you could look down the airfield, and then you could see the planes had turned and they were coming back. So we knew they were coming back.
Just to make another
They were
round.
making another loop, yeah. And they came back, and that's when the majority of everybody else jumped, which was a good thing.
Did y'all have to secure it enough for them?
There was no securing. We weren't big enough at that first pass. Was not
okay.
enough people to secure. It was more about we were on one side of the airfield. The bad guys were on the other side of the airfield, kind of on a hill, firing at us. And then as soon as they saw the planes coming back in, they started firing at the planes. So we felt like if we fired at them, they wouldn't be able to fire at the planes as much. So we just tried to cover the jumpers coming in by firing at the other side just to keep the fire down. And then once the majority of the guys jumped, then we started going into our plan to take over the airfield.
Man, that's well. Thank you for sharing that. I know this is probably bringing up some memories and some emotions. I
just hope my memories are accurate. I don't want to exaggerate them. I like to talk about what I know and what I've seen.
You weren't you definitely weren't like in Disneyland in 1983. You were definitely in Grenada. And so after everybody lands, and I'm assuming combat, happened in America. Did y'all have? So you didn't have any like tanks?
Tank. Rangers don't.
Yeah,
have
you're light.
tanks. We're
You're light armored infantry.
Light, no armor.
Oh, just light infantry.
Light.
Okay. So, but y'all are able to, I guess, maneuver, flank them. Take it out.
Well, it's a whole.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
into.
I mean, the step one was to take over the airfield, because if we can take over the airfield, then we can land more planes with more people.
Right.
So that was our first step, is take over the airfield. So we had a mission to take over the airfield. Everybody had something to do. One of the ironic things about it is we knew they had put heavy equipment all over the airfield because they did not want planes to land. They knew we were coming. So they put bulldozers and all kinds of heavy equipment on the runway so we couldn't land the planes. So Rangers don't know how to operate heavy equipment, per se. So we took two guys from Fort Bragg that were heavy equipment operators, and we requested, and they came with our unit, and their sole mission in life was to move heavy equipment.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Because they're heavy equipment operators. But ironically, if that's the right word, when we got on the airfield, of course, they're not in the right spots. No one knows where they are. We're on the north. I'm on the north end of the airfield with my platoon, my group, and there's heavy equipment on the airfield, and we start receiving a lot of fire from the other side. But we had a guy in my platoon from South Georgia who grew up on a farm, and he just jumped on the bulldozer, cranked it up, raised the blade, and we started going. So it was kind of funny that we had somebody that knew how to drive a bulldozer.
Yeah, no, it's like, hey man, this is the same one that's on my farm. I got it. It's like, okay, like, oh. And you could use that to hide behind too, because you probably didn't have a whole lot of cover.
We did use it to hide behind because we were receiving fire from. Prior to this point, there were a couple of trucks on my end of the airfield that had brought on. They just drove onto the airfield with troops, and they offloaded the troops, and they vacated the truck on the airfield, and the troops went up in the woods, or up in not really woods, but they went up in the hills, Caribbean, so it's not like woods, but they went up to the hills. And so
but let the truck there.
We crossed the airfield and basically took the trucks and used the trucks as cover. And that, to my knowledge, that would have been the first Ranger killed happened at that truck location. I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
In the whole history of the Rangers.
On that operation.
On that operation.
I think he was the first one it was my roommate. His name was Mark Yamani. He was a machine gunner, and he was shooting up the hill. He was behind cover. He was behind the vehicle's tire, but a bullet had come in underneath the vehicle and ricocheted, and took him out. And I think when Mark lost his life right there, I think to a lot of us, our nerves went from nerves to angry at that point.
Yeah.
Now it became personal. At this
Yeah.
up until this point, it was kind of everybody's really edgy, everybody's really nervous. We're all doing our thing, but we're still kind of nervous. But everybody that was around that situation when Mark was killed, and then that word spread, that he was, I think it became more personal, and people became angry at that point. And after that happened is when the bulldozer incident happened, and got behind the bulldozer and kind of went up the hill to fight. And used the bulldozer as cover.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember at that point being angry, not only being angry, but just being, I don't know if sort of revengeful is the word, but wanting to get back.
Yeah.
So you start to take more risk. Up until that point, you really weren't taking a lot of risk. You wouldn't move too far without getting down, and you would really be cautious of what you were doing. But as soon as that happened, it was just like, okay,
we're coming for you.
We're everybody's turned loose now.
Yeah.
And it became a different ball game at that point.
It's almost like they made a mistake. Like, you shouldn't have done that, And then, because if I don't, I could be wrong, but Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood, I don't know if you ever see that movie, but they're Marines, and I think they do a little scene in the movie, and I don't think it's either Grenada or something like that.
It is.
It's Grenada, and they do a bulldozer scene.
do.
So I wonder if it was inspired by this.
It absolutely was.
Was it really? You know what movie I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
What I remember about that movie is they wanted the Rangers to be part of that movie after they came up with the script, and the Army said no. They weren't going to. They didn't want that advertisement. They didn't want that publicity for the Rangers to be in the movie. The producers thought it was a great idea, so they just made the same movie, but they made it with the Marines. And I have never seen the movie. But I do know there's a bulldozer scene in there, so it's too coincidental.
100%. Because when you're saying that, I'm like, man, that's just like the movie. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're Marines. Oh, man.
And I'm not sure how it happened in the Marine. I'm not sure how it happened in Heartbreak Ridge. I mean, I love Clint Eastwood, but I didn't watch that movie. But that did happen in real life.
And then, and I'm not trying to rush you or anything, but I'm assuming you secured the airfield at some point. You went, you got that, and then more troops landed?
Well, not yet. We were still basically pushing out the perimeter, and my platoon was working on the perimeter, pushing out to make a buffer between the actual airfield and the bad guys. So, we're trying to push everybody out, fight everybody away. And we got called to go to the campus to get the students.
Oh, so y'all were you rescued.
So we got.
Oh my gosh!
We got pulled back, and then our mission was to enter into the campus and start getting the students out of their dorms so we could pull them off the airfield.
Did y'all have a roster of
No.
people?
Absolutely not. No.
Did y'all have any CIA what would they boots on the ground or something that told you? Oh wow, that's the '80s for you. And so you went from seizing the airfield, securing that, to also being the rescue team.
Yeah, the operation of securing the airfield was still taking place. We just got pulled back to go to the campus.
And so you were part of the ones that got pulled back. And so when you went to the campus, was there opposition there as well?
No, that the campus was locked down. We didn't know that, though. We didn't know there wasn't going to be any opposition. We were prepared for opposition, so we went in very slowly. But we did not receive any fire as we went from dorm room to dorm room or navigating our way through the campus, getting the students.
Were y'all like, we're Army, we're good guys? Like,
Well, we did, but we did it very cautiously. because we didn't know who was in the rooms. We just didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And sometimes a student would come running out their dorms with their hands just waving and screaming, and you're like, it's a good way to get shot. Just be still, hold up,
Calm
but
down.
they were nervous.
Right.
So we had to figure out how to get them out of their dorms rooms, get them together, secure them so they're safe, and then get them on an airplane. So that was a pretty. And actually, it didn't take very long, but it was kind of a complicated task.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving a herd of cats almost like everybody stay together.
They were happy to move. I mean, they were happy to get going.
Yeah, y'all probably rescue. I feel like if I recall, it was like 80 something or 100 something people. Like it was a good bit of people, right?
Students.
Yeah, wasn't there a lot?
There was a lot.
Yeah.
All I remember from the students, and this is kind of juvenile, is because we knew the Marines were involved in this operation. You talked about the inter-house competition, and one of the reasons we jumped later than we wanted to jump at night, early morning before the sun come up, so we couldn't be seen. But the Marines, it's my understanding, the Marines had a hard time with the weather in their amphibious vehicles getting to the north part of the island, so we had to delay it. So by the time we jumped, it was daylight, and we weren't really happy about that.
Yeah, no.
So I remember getting a bunch of students together, and we were sending them to the airfield to get on the plane, and the word was they were going to fly them, I think, to Charleston, I think is what the word was. I just remember talking, me and a few other guys were just saying, listen, when you guys go back, we are not Marines. Okay, just remember that. So I just remember that.
We are Rangers from the Army. We are not Marines. Like, oh, okay, thanks, Marine. Like, wait, no, you didn't hear me.
Yeah. It was rather juvenile, but I remember distinctly making that comment to some of the students.
No, that's awesome. I guess later on they came up with what's the Joint Operation Command? What's that called?
Yeah, there is one. Yes,
Probably because of a situation like this where we don't need 15 different cooks. We need to have one. I thought there was a JSOC. Is that what it's called, or something like that? But they have a joint thing where now all the pieces are being moved by.
That's right.
One central thing versus everybody. So you get the students back to the airfield, which is also super scary because, this part you've probably seen in movies where people pop out of a door. You don't know who it is. Like,
well, we had to finish clearing the dorms.
The dorms.
So we had to go room to room and clear the dorms to make sure everybody was out, which was actually it was a good job to have because that's the first time we went into a couple of dorms. They had refrigerators, so they had cold water in their refrigerator. So we got to drink some cold water, which we were very happy about.
Yeah, it's the little things in life,
That's the little things in life, yeah.
So some cold water. So you secure the campus. Did y'all move them in trucks or did you have to walk?
They walked.
They walked? Okay. So you walked back to about a couple miles?
The campus was literally at the end of the airfield. I mean, literally maybe 200 meters.
And why was there no opposition on the campus?
Well, well, for one, they were Americans, and I don't think even though they were under curfew, I don't think their intent was to harm the Americans. But the president at that time, President Reagan, was fearful that they could be harmed.
Oh, okay.
And so by the time we got pulled off the hill from the perimeter, there may have been some opposition up there, but they had left.
Okay.
We didn't run into any.
They didn't want to die.
We didn't run into any when we were getting the students out and getting them back to the airfield.
I got you. And so you get them back to the airfield. I guess at this point, a plane or some have landed at this point.
Yeah.
And so you get them back up. How long did y'all
shortly? Not exactly. We held them for a short period until the planes started to land, and I don't remember how long that was.
Okay.
But there was a period of time there where we just had them in a group.
And how long were y'all there on the island?
Not long. That was Tuesday. And we came home on Saturday, so it was a very short period for our mission. I mean, there were American troops on the island for a long time, but as far as what our mission was to take the airfield, rescue the students, secure the perimeter. And once all that was done, then the 82nd came in and landed.
Which is the airborne troopers.
Yeah, but they landed on the airfield, and then they started going throughout the whole country, and just kind of making sure everything was peaceful and stuff like that. So our mission was pretty much done after the few days there. There was a couple of pretty intense skirmishes. One was with the prison, breaking out a prison. The other was there was an American Jeep team that had gotten ambushed. So part of taking over airfields, you have these Jeep teams, and they drive out and do blocking positions to stop people coming on the airfield and so forth. So this particular, and you got to remember, the maps we had were garbage. Basically,
Right.
we had tourist maps almost.
No satellites at this point. Yeah.
No. And so we didn't know. It was hard to determine roads and how far to go. You just didn't have that technology. The GPSs were not existing. So this Jeep team went out of the perimeter on their own, and they went too far. And they got out of the protection of the Americans, of the Rangers. And the Jeep team got ambushed. And I should know, 3, 4 were killed on the Jeep. Maybe 4. One guy survived, and he came back to the perimeter totally distraught and just said, "We got ambushed. They're all dead." And so that was important. That was a significant event because on the back of the Jeep was it was a Stinger missile,
Oh.
Now, at that point, Stinger missiles were pretty important. They were pretty high tech. Today, they're still very important, but they're not as much as the new tools we have.
Yeah.
So we did not want the Stinger missile to get into the hands of the enemy.
Oh,
They would
man.
shoot down an airplane. So my squad was tasked to go find the Jeep and get the missile off the Jeep and bring the missile back. So that was an interesting.
Had they taken it off the Jeep, or did they even realize that it was a
Well,
Stinger
it's
missile?
part of the. It's part of.
It's
the
part
Jeep,
of it.
but
Did
it's
they
just
take it?
attached. Who? The enemy?
Yeah, they
No,
didn't.
they didn't take it. They just ambushed the Jeep, and it stood there. It stayed there.
Oh, okay.
He got back, and at that point, we really didn't know what was going on with the Jeep. We didn't have any satellite imagery. We didn't have anything to reach out there and look at it. So we just had to go to about where he told us it was and find the Jeep, and then try to locate it.
Did y'all bring the troops, bring the boys who were ambushed? Did you bring those bodies back? And all
Well,
that?
we went. It was just my squad, so there was only a handful of us that went out, and we had one platoon leader, lieutenant, and so we're going out. We find the Jeep. We can see the Jeep, so we take over basically this house that's on a hill that overlooks the little valley where the Jeep is. So we take that over because that's a good overlook to watch the Jeep. And we could tell with the binoculars that the missile was still on the Jeep, so we knew that. So now we had to get to the Jeep. So half of the squad maneuvered down to go get to the Jeep. And right before they got to the Jeep, they got ambushed. And the lieutenant that was with us was shot several times. And so at that point, it's a little crazy because we're out by ourselves. Of course, the radios don't work. They never work. We couldn't call for help. So it was just us up there. And
in the house.
well, half of us were in the house overlooking, and the other half was down below getting the.
Tina, this is
Jeep.
literally Heartbreak Ridge right now. They literally stole the exact operation. This is crazy.
Yeah, I never saw it, so I don't know.
Go Army though.
But so the lieutenant was shot up pretty good. So at this point, we fired back to eliminate the enemy. We don't know if we eliminated them or they just ran, but we fired back. And we got to get the lieutenant to help. That was the first mission, and then recover the Jeep again. So the lieutenant was a big boy. He was like 6'2", 6'3", maybe. He was not freshly graduated. He was a Virginia Tech football player, I believe. and the hill was pretty steep.
Right.
So we're tired and we're hot, and so we alternate carrying him up the hill. And now again he's got bullet holes in him. So it's not pleasant for him either. We finally get him up to the house, and basically put him down on the patio of the house, and we have a medic there, and the medic starts working on him, and then we go back down to do what we can do with the Jeep. And while we are trying to get back to the enemy, they didn't seem too concerned about the Jeep. I guess they just didn't realize what was on the Jeep.
Yeah.
While we're back down there, these BTR 60s, which is an armored vehicle with wheels that the Russians have, and they started to come down the road towards the Jeep.
Oh, gosh.
And so we got into a little skirmish with that, and then realized, okay, we need to get the lieutenant back, because he's going to die if we don't get him back. So again, we didn't have any radios. We didn't have any way to communicate with anybody. So luckily, the people at the perimeter thought something must be wrong. They heard the noise. They didn't hear any radio contact, so they sent a Jeep to our location, which was great because at that point now the lieutenant was still alive. We worked on him medically, and we put him on the Jeep and was able to drive him back to the perimeter, and they flew him out to the ship.
Let's go.
I think it was called the Roosevelt, the ship that was out there to get worked on.
Wow. And so, did y'all have to go back out to the missile Jeep?
No, after we got the lieutenant, what had happened, to the best of my knowledge, we did not go back down to the Jeep because what happened, these BTRs came down the road, right?
Yeah.
And what didn't make any sense to us is they were going down the road, but they were headed towards our perimeter, which is where the Rangers are,
Yeah.
where we are. And I'm thinking, why are they going that way? They don't need to be going that way. And they just kept going, and it was comical in a sense, but you couldn't. They got behind the bushes and the trees, and you couldn't see them. But as soon as they got out of our vision, and they got to where you could know they were close to the perimeter, you just heard these big guns go off, which the Rangers carry. We carry these anti-tank weapons at that time called 90mm recoilless rifles. And you could just hear one go boom, and you could see smoke come up. So you know,
Yeah.
Well, there were two of them, and so you heard another shot. So then, about 5 minutes later, I guess, well, the first one we knew later that the first one was totally eliminated. The second one got hit, but it didn't get totally destroyed. So it turned around and starts coming back down the road, but it's all messed up. It's like it's all tore up. It's got a flat tire, but it keeps going away. So at that point, we really weren't concerned about the missile because they didn't seem very interested in it, and we felt like the perimeter was going to move out. So they went and we got the lieutenant back, and then they went and got the bodies and everything in the Jeep.
Wow. Man, this is intense, T-Nun.
And that, I don't even know what day that was. That was a day of, after Tuesday, I guess.
Yeah. Before Saturday,
Yeah.
after Tuesday.
Yeah.
No, but I mean that just goes to show like the uncertainty of combat, like the uncertainty of of what's going to happen. You have a plan, and most of the time that plan does not work out. You have to adapt to the situation.
90% of the time it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and only one Ranger was named Mark. You said
He was the first.
he was the first. Okay, but several casualties. Man, and then did you feel like? And you can tell me to hush if you want me to, but did this change your perspective? I mean, like in life of just, no, this stuff is real. Like, 'cause that's combat.
The interesting part was during the whole operation, your adrenaline is just going, and you're just doing. You're reacting just like a Ranger School. You're just trying to get to the other side. But then we got to a point where we kind of knew we were done, and we kind of relaxed a little bit, and everybody was feeling pretty good. You know, everybody was sad, but everybody was feeling pretty good about what they had done. And then the word came down, we had another mission. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, everybody just flipped. We're like, what? You know, so your emotions, you're at that point where you were feeling relaxed. It's all done. We're gonna head back, and then all of a sudden, boom! There's another mission. So everybody really starts to gear back up, and their nerves start to get a little bit on edge. You know.
What was the next mission?
It had to do with the prison, the compound, and so some helicopters came in to pick up some guys, and I was on Chalk 4, I think, or 5. I can't remember, but I never got on the plane. I never got on the helicopter. The first Chalks left, which is the first series of helicopters left. They had some issues, but they ended up not taking another Chalk in. They ended up figuring out, and they didn't need the rest of us. But it was
just that gut of
okay, yeah, you know. And you know, it's spiritually, it's you know, I mean, I think at that time, you know, I was a Christian, but I definitely was not living the Christian life. There's no way you could pretend otherwise. And so, yes, I prayed a lot, and I always tell this, you know, I think that the prayer of a mom, I can't, it's nowhere in the Bible.
Right.
But I think the prayer of a mom for her child is probably more powerful than anything. And I know my mom was praying for me, and I always give her credit for that, you know, because I really felt like it was just so many times where it could have been, but it wasn't, you know. And you always want to ask your question why, but no one knows why. It's just the way it is. Sometimes it's just bad luck, you know. So spiritually, it really hit me because I felt guilty for praying, you know, because I knew I was that guy. Okay, Lord, you get me out of this, and then I'll be good for the rest of my life, kind of thing, you know. And I knew better than that. I grew up in church. I went to church 3 days a week, you know, so I knew that storyline, you know.
Right.
So I was kind of guilty. I was feeling guilty for doing that, but I do remember thanking the Lord, you know, for sparing my life for whatever reason, which I had no idea why, you know, but it was quite a spiritual moment for me. Then getting back, you know, my parents knew at that point. My parents knew we were gone, but that's all they knew. They didn't know who had died, who had lived. They didn't know anything. So
Once again, before all the social media, all the 15,000 news networks and coverage on everything, this is the 80s. I mean, early 80s.
yeah, so Mom and Dad got in a car and just drove from Virginia Beach, drove on their way to Savannah, you know, because they wanted to know. And so they had heard on the news. I can't remember. They knew we were coming back that weekend or something. I don't know. And they knew the number to the barracks because, you know, that's how they would get a hold of me. And so they didn't know whether I was alive or dead. They didn't know. They just knew there was a handful of Rangers who were killed, but they didn't know who. So when we got back to the barracks, we went through our normal procedure, you know, start cleaning weapons, getting everything cleaned up and, you know, turned in. And my dad had called what we call the CQ, which is the guy who answers the phone. It's a duty. And he had answered the phone, and my dad had asked for me. And the guy said, I see him around here somewhere. I'm not sure where he is. And that was the first confirmation. And Dad said, well, you just tell him we're on our way. Stay put. Well, I wasn't going anywhere, you know. But so that's the first confirmation they had, you know, that I was alive.
Yeah.
So when we got released, you know, I can't even remember now. I guess it was Saturday night. Probably we got released, or maybe Sunday morning. It was probably Saturday night we got released. And I got to see my mom and dad, you know. And they stayed for a day or so and went back home.
Well, and this is where, I know we went out of timeline here, but this is to me is super important to know this story because this is in '83. You were signed back in in '85 to re-up for 4 more years. So you had gone through, and that's why I asked that because you just went through the word incredible, but not incredible as in the sense like of awesomeness, but incredible as in this is not normal, right? This is an operation where people were killed, you were shot at. It's stressful. You don't know if a single bullet just boom, you're out. One fly shot, boom. One ricochet, boom. One parachute of 500 feet, which is unheard of. And I'm glad you didn't have to do 500 feet at night because that'd be even scarier.
But it would have been safer.
It would have been safer. Yeah, it would have been safer, but also a little scarier. But you're in this, and so that's what I'm saying. That mindset in '85, you're 22 years old. Why did you go, I can do 4 more years, versus going, I've seen some things. I've been through some things. I think I've done my time.
Well, a lot of guys did, and nothing against that. That's fine. But I think somewhere along that point, I said to myself, "Yeah, I'm good at this. I can do this. This is what I'm going to do." I absolutely love my country and doing what I do, and I love the brotherhood of who we, guys I serve with. I mean, we're family. You can't do anything about that. That's their family, and so it just became a new love for me. Just love what I'm doing.
Do you have some guys that you still talk to from that era?
All the time. Yeah.
All the time?
Yeah.
It's a brotherhood, right?
It is.
My dad was deployed to Iraq in 2005. And I like to specify the year because my brother went to Afghanistan in 2019. And I'm not saying it wasn't unsafe for my brother. I mean, it was traumatic. But 2005, Iraq was a wild, wild west. I mean, it was crazy. And he still talks about his Army buddies that are like, I know their names, like almost like they're cousins of mine.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, Sergeant Clark? Yeah, I know Sergeant Clark. Sergeant Denny? Yeah, I know Sergeant Denny. Sergeant Sonnen? I know Sergeant Sonnen. Like I know all these guys who like, because he talks about them. And I feel like Caleb and Jamie probably could name a couple of your Army buddies because it's a brotherhood. Especially when you serve in a combat zone, and especially like when you're and y'all are a really tight unit in the Ranger, even more. And
you have mutual respect for each other, and you also, whenever you go through something with somebody that's painful,
right?
Whether it be a football tryout or whatever, you come close to that person because you shared that pain, that experience, and so for us, it wasn't just a tryout. It was our daily life. It was every day we were doing something, and so you really, really became close. And it's really hard to say because when I talk to people in general, I try to be cautious a lot of times with my words.
Right.
Because I'm always afraid I might say the wrong thing or hurt somebody's feelings or whatever. But when I get around my Ranger buddies, you don't care if you're hurting somebody's feelings. You're not. You just tell the truth.
Right.
Dude, you're fat. You're overweight. You need to get a haircut. You look like crap or whatever. I mean, you just say it. And you're not, and everybody takes it with love, But I would never say that to somebody, other than my Ranger buddies, because I know they're not going to, wear their emotions on their sleeves and be all upset.
No, I love it. I love it. I once, when I was a kid, my dad and his Army buddies went to like some restaurant. I don't know, like they like we went to go visit, and then we all went and ate like an Applebee's or something. And there was like 7 of them, and I was a kid, maybe middle school, and the amount of curse words that I heard from 7 people in under like 3 minutes was like, I don't even know, like they're just all Army buddies, and I was like, what in the world am I witnessing right now?
And I guess that is unfortunate, but the vocabulary is not Harvard vocabulary.
Yeah, it is not. But I do. So for those listening, so we're in '85. You re-sign. in 91, I believe you moved to Dahlonega, right? 90. Oh, I was close. I want you to commend how good my friendship is. I was pretty close because I remember things. We've talked a lot. I've known you for a long time. When does the love of your life come into the picture?
Well, I left battalion. I left 1st Battalion after the Panama Invasion.
Okay.
Which the Panama Invasion happened in '89, Christmas of '89.
Whoa, were you part of that as well?
Right. That was Operation. Yes. Yeah.
Wait, oh my gosh. Wait, you were part of 2 military operations? I thought it was just Grenada.
No, you missed that.
So Panama was the Panama Canal. I know less about this one.
Panama was Operation Just Cause.
Just Cause.
For Noriega.
Okay.
To get Noriega.
In '89, what was your Ranger role in that?
That's an interesting story because up until the time I re-enlisted, I was an infantry guy. And then after Grenada, the Army decided that they needed 3 Ranger battalions and not 2. At that time, we only had 2.
So the one in Washington.
So they wanted to form a 3rd Ranger battalion. So then they created a regiment of 3 battalions and a regimental headquarters. So we had a regimental commander come in. So up until that point, each battalion was controlled by their battalion commander. So my big boss, was at Hunter, Savannah. That was our boss.
What rank would that be?
He would have been a light colonel.
Okay.
So he doesn't report. He's in charge.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So then we get a regiment. So now we have a 3rd battalion at Columbus, and now we have a higher headquarters. So now we have a regimental commander.
It's Columbus, Georgia?
Right. So the regimental commander came out with a policy that if you have been in battalion, and I want to say it was like 5 years or more, that you needed to leave. Because part of what the Rangers were formed to do, again, goes back to leadership. They wanted guys to get all this leadership, go out to the Army
and spread it,
and then maybe come back later. So I had been past that point, so I was on the block to having to leave, but I wasn't ready to leave.
E4, E5 at this time?
I was E5, E6, maybe. No, I was E5. I was a buck sergeant. So there were several of us in that boat, and some guys just said, "Well, I'll go ahead and leave and come back." But there was a few of us that said, "Yeah, we really don't want to go. So what do? We couldn't figure out what to do." But this is when we were due to re-enlist, So it was they had this program where if you re-enlisted under a certain job skill, you could get a bonus. And of course, we're all about money.
Yeah,
we
come
wanted some
on,
money.
yeah.
So we thought, well, what if we re-enlist under one of these different jobs that the Ranger Battalion has? Then we can stay. So the jobs were.
I'm trying to play the system. That's what you're doing.
There was a medic. You could re-enlist as a medic. Of course, the Ranger Battalion has medics. And there was forward observers, which is in artillery world. Forward observers call artillery in for the big guns.
Oh, okay.
But in the Ranger Battalion, it's completely different. The forward observers do close air support, naval gunfire, gunship, stuff like that. So me and a buddy said, well, let's just be FOs, and then our time will start over again. So we re-enlisted as 13 Fox. At that point, it was 13 Fox. Drove out to Fort Steele, AIT as E5s with a bunch of brand new privates. Came back to battalion, and then basically the clock started ticking again. So then our clock started time-wise. It's like a new assignment for us. Mm-hmm. So then I was a forward observer in the Ranger Battalion, and I had stayed there as a forward observer until Panama. And when Panama came, I was what's called the battalion fire support NCO, and I was due to leave. I was really supposed to leave battalion. It may have been around 88, because what happens is you get tired.
Yeah.
Physically you get exhausted, mentally you get exhausted, and you just kind of need a break. And I had been there a long time, and I was ready to take a break. And so I had put my packet in to leave.
To regular Army or to like
No,
retire?
to
Or to get
come
out?
to Dahlonega, actually. But at that point in battalion, there were only, I was one of the very, very few Halo jump masters. And so if I left, there was nobody to train new jump masters.
What does Halo mean?
High altitude, low opening. It's like a military skydiving
Okay.
type deal. And so we needed that job skill. And so the commander said, basically, I understand you want to leave. You deserve it. You can leave. But we really need you here for another year or so until we can get more slots to send people to Halo Jump Master to get qualified, because it's a very hard school. And then once they get qualified and we get enough, then we'll let you go. So they moved me to an easier job position. Basically, I was what's in the Ranger world, we call it special skills. So I went to that position to where we just controlled Halo jump, scuba stuff, things like that, and I wasn't in the line, so it was much easier work. And my job was to stay there until
To be the Halo Jump Master, yeah.
until we get some more people qualified from Halo Jump Master. So I hung around a little bit. That happened, and so
Panama. Okay.
so then I called Ranger assignments, and I said, okay, now I can leave. I want to go to Dahlonega. And the guy at Ranger assignment said, well, you can't go as a 13 because they don't have 13s Foxtrots at Ranger School.
Yeah.
Being an instructor, you got to be 11 Bravo. I said, well, my secondary is 11 Bravo. I said, who can make me 11 Bravo again? He said, well, I can. I said, well, okay, let's do it. So, boom, paperwork. Now I'm back to being 11 Bravo.
Because you had already been 11 Bravo,
Right,
which is infantry.
Right.
Shout out to 11 Bravos, my dad and brother, 11 Bravos. Now, but Panama, you were there during that conflict in Panama. Were you the Halo?
No.
Okay.
I was actually, I had out-processed the unit. I had out-processed the 1st Ranger Battalion, turned in all my stuff. And this was the weekend. And on Monday, I was to drive to Dahlonega. That was the day I was going to leave and drive to Dahlonega. Also on Monday, the Ranger Battalion was going to take leave. The entire battalion was going to go what we call block leave. Well, the phone rang Sunday, and it was a notification. And now I had basically out-processed. I didn't sign completely out, but I had out-processed. And I got that, and I went, why would they call a notification on the night before everybody's to go on block leave? So I just thought, I need to go in and see what's going on. So when I went in to the unit, I was living off post at this time. When I went into the unit, the 18-hour sequence of deployment had started. And I walked into the headquarters where my commander was, and he just said, Sergeant Nunley, he said, this is what's happening. Do you want to go? And I said, sure. He said, well, remember that program I told you about RIP?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, well, go to RIP and get some of that gear and come back. So I had to go to RIP, get me a rucksack, get me some equipment, LBE, get all my stuff, come back to the headquarters. And then I got back, and he informed me that at that point, again, I don't want to be inaccurate, but at that point, there was only a few of us. I'd say less than 5 of us that were there still from Grenada and had experienced Grenada.
Yeah.
So,
Which is valuable to have military experience.
So because of that, he said, we're going to make you a primary jump master on one of the airplanes going in. And I said, yeah, roger that. So we're good. So I ended up jump mastering, which is putting out the troops, and jumped. But I ended up jump mastering aircraft 1 onto the airfield that we went on.
Well, because you're Halo certified too. I mean,
Yeah, but Halo has nothing to do with that jump. It's another combat jump at 500 feet.
Oh, so
This time we did jump
slow.
at night.
It was at night.
It was at night, and I put my guys out, made the jump, was on the ground just not very long as far as days wise. That operation in control pretty quick. Unlike Grenada, it wasn't as chaotic as Grenada.
I
It
would
was
say,
much more smooth.
was there less opposition?
Yeah. So
Okay.
well, no, the opposition on the initial jump was pretty intense, but
You see tracers and stuff?
it went away pretty quick after we got on the ground because we were just more organized. Everything happened much more like it should have happened.
Well, and by this point too, not that I'm not trying to diss the early Rangers, but now you're over a decade old, so you are a little bit more coming into who you are. Because that Grenada, you're still kind of in that infant phase
Right.
of
Exactly.
Of
Yeah, and
Rangers
we
and-
were used to working with the other units now.
Yeah.
So, and remember me telling you the story about going into Grenada, the first few planes turned because they were
Right.
getting. Well, that was a huge deal. That screwed up the whole low plan on the field,
Yeah.
on the airfield. So, I remember being in the jump master brief for Panama. The Air Force colonel, I believe he was, when he was briefing his pilots, he said, here's one thing you're not going to do. You're not going to turn your plane around. You're going to fly that plane straight. You're going to keep it on the jump azimuth, and you're not going to turn until you get to the other side of the ocean. And he says, this is not going to happen like it did in basically Grenada. And kudos to the pilots, because when I was hanging out the aircraft, checking everything for my jumpers to go out, those planes, I mean, you could see a lot of the planes, because there were multiple airfields we were jumping at. Everybody was just on track. Our planes flew straight as an arrow. They received a lot of fire from the ground, but they never once turned. They just kept flying straight, which was so important for us to get our people out onto the ground. You know,
Did they? This is a little side, quick question. Are there not Army pilots?
no,
Okay, there's Army helicopter pilots,
Yes.
but no airplane pilots. All Air Force.
Air Force
Okay, got it.
for the big airplanes.
For the big airplanes, I got you. And so when you land there is opposition, but since it's so organized and y'all are more of who you are come into it, y'all get into it pretty quick and get the airfield secured.
Yeah, and that's right. And not just our airfield, but across the whole country. Everybody was working in unison, and it just went.
Oh, like the Navy was doing their part, and
The other
Marines or
Rangers
whatever.
on the other airfields, the SF guys were there. So everybody was working together, and it just became a really nice operation. To tie in the spiritual part,
Yeah.
like backed up from the Grenada. So I would say, that little conversation I had didn't go very far on Grenada because I still wasn't living the spiritual life that I should be living. So when we get the jump master brief about the airfield, one of the things we find out is at the very end of the airfield that I'm jumping on, there is a mound and there is a 50 caliber machine gun with 3 people. And that way they could cover the airfield. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that's not good because as a jump master, I'm the last guy to get out. So that's where I would land. I would land near the end of the airfield, which is where that machine gun position was. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, God's getting even with me now because, I said I would do this and I didn't. And now here I am again, So on the plane ride down, I have a headset on. We're getting updates on the ground situation. But really, I just kind of ignored everything just to wait to hear about is the machine gun still active? Because we had SF guys on the ground giving us intel. And so at the last update I got before I had to take off my headset was machine gun was still active. So I got really nervous because I had to take my headset off because we had to in-flight rig. So we had to put the parachutes on while we were in the plane. It's called in-flight rigging, and that takes time. So we're doing all that, me and my assistant jump masters and the other guys, and we're getting everybody hooked, getting everybody ready to jump. And I was still worried. I was just worried about that machine gun, thinking, okay, this is it. I'm going to get blasted.
Because you're landing closer to it and then just, wah!
Yeah, because I'm going to be right next to it, So I thought, okay, I'm thinking, okay, Lord, this is it. I get it. But let me see what I can do, So I talked to the Air Force crew chief. The crew chief's the guy who controls basically the back of the airplane. And I told the crew chief, I said, I want a green light 20 seconds early. he said, "You're not going to be over the drop zone." I said, "That's okay," because in my doors, I had 2 motorcycles going out both doors, and the Air Force guys, the combat control guys, were going to jump out with their motorcycle, and they have their own mission on the ground. And I thought, well, notoriously, whenever we jump the motorcycles, they take forever to get out the door. They get hung up a lot. And the Air Force guys, they're particular. They don't want you to touch their motorcycles. They want to get it out the door themselves and so forth. So I said, well, if I can get them out a few seconds early, they got a motorcycle. They can make up the distance that they're going to be away from the airfield.
Right.
But that'll put me further away from the machine gun position. So the loadmaster said, "Oh, okay, you get it." So I told my other jump masters, I said, "Listen, when those bikes are going to go in the door, when that green light comes on, they're out. And if they're not out, then you kick them out." I said, They need to get out the door. And they knew why. They were like, "Oh, yeah, roger that. We'll get them out." And so I figured, I felt better because I felt like I was taking charge. Okay, that's going to keep me away from that machine gun position, you know. The other thing, I don't mean to get too confusing, but the other part of this was we knew the Panamanian Defense Force wore our uniforms. They wore BDUs. They wore the same uniforms because they got them from us.
That's confusing.
So when we jumped with burlap in our helmets so that at night when you're looking through their night vision, you could see the silhouette of the burlap. You knew that was an American and not, an enemy guy. So as a jump master, part of what you do is before the jump, you're kind of hanging out the aircraft, checking the door, making sure there's no bars around the edge so everybody's static line won't get cut, and you're checking the airspace and so forth. And it's also a good way to get fresh air because the ride really, kind of make you a little sick. So I do a lot of hanging out because the doors opened up pretty early, and you could see a lot of air-to-ground fire. But the wind, catches your helmet and pushes it back, and I didn't even think about it, but it was stretching my chin strap. Don't even think about it, So time comes up, light turns green, the bikes start to go out, they get stuck, obviously. And we had a hard time getting them out. We finally get them out, and then we start pushing the jumpers out. I jump out, the last guy to go out, and my helmet falls off because it was so stretched from me hanging out for so long.
Yeah.
So now I don't have a helmet to identify me as an American when I hit the ground. And when I hit the ground, I literally was 15 feet from this machine gun position, but there was nobody there. So I was like, okay, Lord, I get it now.
At what point when you're jumping and like it's pitch? I mean, let's say it's pitch black. You don't have night vision goggles.
Not while you're jumping.
Not while you're jumping. And when do you start seeing the truck? Like when you're like on the ground, like you're coming down from the machine gun. The machine gun
It wasn't in a truck. It was on the ground.
Oh, it was on the ground. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
At what point do you see that?
Not until I got there.
And so you get to the ground and you look up and you're like, oh, thank God. Like, all right, God, this is my sign. Like,
Yeah. And then I had to find a helmet.
so you don't get shot by your own
That's right.
friendlies.
That was my next priority.
Like, did it fall on the ground somewhere? Like,
It
you
did
find
fall. I ended up getting another one from somebody that wasn't wearing it. And so a couple of days later, someone found it because you have your names on it, and they brought it to me.
Let's go. So you kind of made the jump twice. You made the jump, and your helmet made the jump. And so that was a big spiritual moment for you in the sense of like, God, all right, I keep telling you I'm going to get my life on track, and I kind of fall short on it. And then I get to these moments of like, oh, this is pretty serious.
Yeah.
And so that kind of was one of those big kick in the butts to get it serious. And how long were you there for that?
I wasn't on the ground very long. We jumped on 20th. We were there through Christmas. We were there, I'd say maybe 10 days.
Okay.
And then we started sending people back, for certain, life goes on. So
Right.
we had guys that needed to go to professional development schools. We had guys that were supposed to PCS like me, and just different reasons you would send people back that weren't needed at that time. So everything was pretty much under control. So,
Okay.
so I came back on one of the planes, and then officially signed out, and then came to Dahlonega.
Now,
and that was in January
of
'90.
of 90. So when you came back, why did you pick Dahlonega? Because you never been there before besides Ranger School, right?
Right.
So you just thought, I just want to work there?
Well, I didn't. I just wanted a neat place to work. It's an instructor position, so it's not.
Oh, okay. So you
it's
went
not-
there more for the job than the location.
Yeah, it's not really a high tempo, and I really didn't want to go to Florida because I didn't like Florida. I thought I would
Yeah.
like the mountains more,
Yeah.
so I wanted to come to Dahlonega.
So your reign of Kingdom of Dahlonega started in January 1990.
January '90.
And have you met Robbie at this point?
Oh no.
No. So she's not here. So you're here, 1990. You're working the Ranger camp. When do you start meeting? Like getting to what I know you now as? Like, did you work there for how long?
I was there from '90 to '93.
Okay. And at that point, when did you meet Robbie?
I hadn't been there very long, but let's see, a few months maybe, because we were married in June of '91.
Wait, that's okay. All right, that's super fast. And so you were there in 90. You met her in 1990 at some point. How did you meet? Was she like working in the cafeteria or something? Like,
No, I was playing on a softball team, a travel softball team, and she was best friends with the coach's girlfriend. So the guy that coached our travel team was Robbie's best friend.
Oh,
And
okay.
so we had a Sunday practice one day to get ready for a tournament, and Robbie just came to practice with her girlfriend, and that's how I met her.
You're like, "What's up, girl?" And she's like, "Oh, he's a ranger." I was
I don't think she was impressed.
no, she wasn't. No. But y'all definitely. I mean, I guess that's over a year. I mean, y'all dated probably a year or so
Yeah,
before
right
y'all
at it.
got
Mhm.
married.
Yeah.
And then didn't y'all live in Alaska at some point?
Yeah, I stayed at camp.
Folks, I want you to know this man he's done a lot of different lives. I mean, this is crazy.
I stayed at camp another 2 years till '93, and then I was ready to leave Georgia at that point, ready to see something else, and so I was either go to Italy or go to Alaska. I was trying to figure out, and so I always
Just casual.
I thought Alaska would be neat, and so I got assigned to Alaska. There was an airborne unit in Alaska at Anchorage called Task Force 501st, and it was an airborne unit, and so that's where I got assigned.
Is that your first non-ranger assignment?
Yes,
Was that a big, like, was that weird for you?
it was weird, but it was really good because I would say it was a bigger leadership challenge.
Okay.
Because I got assigned there. I was a platoon sergeant at that time, so I had 4 squads. So I had about
E6?
E7, E7,
E7.
E7. Yeah, so I had 4 squads. 40 some guys, but these weren't Ranger guys. These were regular Army guys, and a lot of them didn't want to be there. But you can't get rid of them, because
Right.
it's a different type of world. So you have to motivate them to work to get things done, and so I had to figure that out. I had to figure out how I was going to do that with these guys, and it was an interesting few years. I would have to say that experience was, for leadership wise, it was probably more important to me than
Anywhere
anything I
else,
had done,
even.
because to lead guys that want to be there, lead guys that are motivated,
Cream of the crop.
lead guys
Yeah.
that are right top of the world. It's a little bit easier if you're physically fit and you can lead by example. It's a little bit easier to do that, but to try to take charge of guys who aren't exposed to that, who aren't happy with the Army, they're just ready to get out, and it's a different environment.
I talk about in the teaching
Great people,
world.
they were just in a different mindset. So I had to figure that out because I had not been used to that.
We talk about in the teacher world, it's like if you have a AP class who are seniors, which means they're going to college, they're studying, they're getting off, they're trying to get fives on their exams. They're all academically challenged. Like want to do that. Well, they don't have a whole lot of classroom management. Versus, I got a freshman class of 34 kids in there, and some of them don't want to be in school, but they have to be in this classroom anyways. That teacher has to do a lot more classroom management and learn how to maybe connect in a completely different way than you do in this elite AP class. Both,
Yeah,
good,
exactly.
yeah, good things, but one is way different. So that's interesting. Where like you're kind of like, all right, I'm in the cream of the crop this AP class, and now I'm going here, and you're having to expand your leadership capabilities and how you relate to people and talk to people.
Exactly.
That's
I mean, it's all about how you take care of your people, And so when I signed into the unit, my squad leaders are taking me around, showing me every place, and we go to the arms room. And a platoon is assigned a block of weapons. So my weapons might be 1 to 50, and the second platoon they may be 51 to 100, and third platoon may be 101 or whatever. So I got into the arms room, and the squad leaders were saying, here in our weapons are this number, but whatever you get, don't let the armor give you weapon 47. And I'm like, why not 47? And they said, well, the last 3 platoon sergeants who had weapon 47 either got fired or hurt. And I said, well, that's the one I want. And so I want weapon 47. And they go, no, you really don't want it. I said, yeah, I do. I want it. So that's the weapon I got assigned. And then when I left the unit a few years later, they got me a little plaque, and it said, to the man who broke the curse of weapon 47.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
And
yeah.
I really feel like I feel like I did pretty well with that group of guys because you kind of know how you do with them by how they treat you and how they respond.
Right.
And even today, 2 weeks ago, I got a text from one of them, that's like, hey, how about a visit? I can come down. And he's a super successful businessman now, has his own plane. And he's like, I'll come down and fly in, and me and Anderson, and we'll visit you. So that means a lot because they must have felt like I did well in looking after them, which is my goal, to look after them and make sure that, they're taken care of, but yet they're trained in case we need to go somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, sometimes, not that you don't have an impact on that cream of the crop, ranger crop, because that is a brotherhood, but sometimes the people who are not kind of like that, the one that your unit, they show a little more outward appreciation, and that feels pretty good too, because they get you a plaque, you keep in touch with them, you're impacted them, and it's just a reminder, like, I broke the curse of 47. Great episode title, by the way. So that was from 93 to what, 96, probably 3 years?
Yeah, my son was born in 95, and we left in 96.
Oh, Caleb was born in Alaska? Mm-hmm. I don't think I knew that. Was Robbie excited about Alaska?
She was.
She was?
She loved it.
Over Italy, though?
Well, we'd never been to Italy, so we didn't know.
Okay.
But she loved Alaska. She had a great job, and we really enjoyed living there. I actually would have stayed another year if the Army would have let me, but they didn't want me to stay.
Controversial.
They like to move you,
Did it, yeah. And so, where did you go? Did you retire, or did you go back to?
No, I had orders to go to Italy because I'd come up on the promotion list to the E8, and I was going to go to Italy, and we were excited about that. And then about 60 days, maybe a little bit less than that, from leaving Ranger assignments, calls me and says, hey, we're going to have to take you off your orders to Italy. You're going to have to go back to Dahlonega. And I was like, dude, I just left Dahlonega 3 years ago. I'm not ready to go back. I want to go to Italy. And like, well, you can't because, and the reason is there was, in Ranger school, since I had left, Florida phase had, I think, 3 students, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, were killed in training from I think it was hypothermia maybe or something. So
not alligators.
No, there was a big investigation, and after the investigation, the recommendation was they did a big investigation on all the camps, all 3 camps. They said the instructors with the knowledge and experience rotated out, and there has not been enough
Experience with those people.
overlap with the new guys, and so we're losing expertise. We're losing knowledge. So what they said is anybody who had been at camps before that had a successful tour, and we're rotating, need to come back. So instead of me going to Italy, I came back.
Their
to Delonica.
incompetence of how to run prevented you to go to Italy. I mean, that's really because they rotated people out and they didn't really think about that, because I'm guessing as an instructor, it's your professional, recommendation of if you see student, John Smith over here, you have to be, as an instructor, go, he may not be quitting, but his life is at risk.
Yes.
And you get the right to pull them out, right?
That's right.
So, there's probably times where that person is actually experiencing hypothermia. You're not picking up on the signs as an instructor, and you need to pick up on those signs and pull them out. But that person, as an instructor, apparently didn't have the experience. So they're like, we got to put people back so people stop dying.
So I ended up coming back to Delonica.
So you went there to pretty much, I guess they put you but did they prevent you from getting the EA slot?
No, I still got promoted.
So that was part of, okay. Yeah. So you still said, well, hey, I better get my promotion.
Yeah, no. I still got promoted and was a first sergeant at the Ranger camp.
Okay, well, let me ask you that. I thought you were a master sergeant.
Well, a master sergeant and a first sergeant are the same grade.
Yeah, E8.
Yeah. A master sergeant is not in charge of troops, and a first sergeant is in charge of troops. So you can have a different position.
Okay.
Just based upon your position. If you're in charge of people, then you are the first sergeant of that group. But if you're not in charge of people, you're a different position than you're a master sergeant.
I got you. Because my dad was a first sergeant. They call him Top. Do they call you Top? Was that one of the nicknames?
That word's not really used in the Ranger community, but it's an Army word, yes.
Oh, it's an Army word.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, he's an elitist over here, the Rangers. We
No,
don't, we don't
it's
use
just
that.
not something we use.
And so you went back there, which I think, Caleb could have been speaking Italian. He lived in Italy for 3 years. So, but y'all come back here, and that's from what? That's what, 95?
That would have been 96
to 99, 3 years?
No, to 97, because during that time period when I was at camp, I had a back injury.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I've always had a bad back. And then you just
From
jumping
jumping
on planes and
1,000,
everything,
yeah.
your back just literally just hurts. Everybody's back hurts. But I had an episode where they were wanting to operate on me, and I did not want them to operate on me. So I had to see a bunch of specialists, and I did. I saw 2 civilian specialists and 2 military specialists on backs. I got advice from all of them, and I felt like the best advice I got was from a athletic doctor down in Atlanta, and he said, I could operate on you, no problem. I wouldn't hesitate. You could be operated on. He said, but if you can keep the pain out of your legs and modify your lifestyle, that's what I would recommend. If you can't keep it out of your legs, then it's a quality of life issue. We definitely need to go in and take care of it now. But if you can modify your lifestyle to keep it out of your legs, I think you probably can live a good life like that. And I thought, well, the only way I'm going to do that is not jump out of planes, not carry a heavy ruck.
Mm-hmm.
So I either had to figure out what I was going to do. So I went back and I talked to the sergeant major of the camp and said, listen, I really don't want to get my back operated on. I said, but I'm afraid if I keep jumping and doing this, then it's really going to hurt. And then, I could
mess
have
up
serious
permanently,
problems. So he said, well, why don't you go to ROTC? And I was like, I don't know what ROTC, remember, I just graduated high school. I don't know what college ROTC was. I said, well, what's ROTC? And he's like, at the college here in Delonica, those guys that wear those uniforms all around.
Uh-huh.
So I had no idea what he was talking about. And I thought, well, that'd be cool. Yeah, go over to college. So he made a phone call, and they had a position opening. So I just basically went from the Ranger camp to the college to work at the ROTC department at the college.
Well, now, was that considered active duty, though?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, they put you like an active duty? Oh, okay. So I went towards your years of service.
Oh, yeah. There's a ROTC is active duty.
Okay. Well, I thought some of the guys are retired.
There's two. It's complicated.
Oh, okay,
It's
okay.
confusing. It's not complicated, but it's confusing. There's two sides. At North Georgia College is a senior military college.
Right.
So
One
there's
of 6 in the country.
There's an active duty component there, and there's a retired component. The retired guys wear uniforms, but they work for the state. The active duty guys work for the Army, and they're federal employees. And they have 2 different missions. The active duty guys' missions is to teach and run ROTC to get the guys commissioned as officers and get them ready. The retired guys, they basically run the Corps, which is the daily, everything else, the barracks, they're making sure their grades are right, inspections, parades.
Did you have to report to those guys, though? Or did y'all work kind of more in tangent?
Well,
with
the
each other?
active duty component officer was an 06, and the retired component was a retired 06. So,
Oh, so there's 2 colonels.
right.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, one active, one retired.
What? I did not know that.
So my last few years, I worked for the active duty colonel,
Mm-hmm.
and then I didn't really know what OTC was. I learned real quick,
Yeah.
and so I basically was running the pre-camp program, which is the juniors in their junior year. And
Okay.
that's who I worked with mostly.
How many active duty guys do y'all have at the time?
At the time I was there,
Like 3 or 4, or is it more?
probably 10,
Oh, okay. There's a bunch.
maybe 12,
And that's full time.
full time. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so you went there, and that also I want to assume, I don't want to speak for you, but gave you a little bit more of a stable time, like with family, as far as like
Yeah.
work hours.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
It was able to, my back, I didn't have to do the sit-ups, which was another thing that caused my back to really go out. So I was able to recover over time and and I felt good about that. I had to turn down being promoted because I didn't want to make the E9, even though I was eligible. I didn't want to make E9 and then have to go to the Sergeant Major's Academy and stay in because it would have put me in a bad position. So I just turned down selection for E9.
when you went to the college, is that where you became a master sergeant?
Yeah, then basically I was a master sergeant because I don't have troops. I have cadets. I didn't have troops.
Oh, I got you. So you had to live both worlds. That's interesting. The E9, because Sergeant Major, you had to go to a whole nother school for that. And was there an E9 slot at North Georgia?
There is. Mm-hmm.
Oh, there is? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But
I
it would
didn't
have been
know.
more years.
More years and things like that. So when did you officially retire from the military?
2001.
So 2001. So you were from the college for
4 years.
4 years? Okay. And you started in 81, so you did 20 years in the
Right.
military. And that, to me, was that emotional for you to hang it up? Or was it like the back was hurting? Jamie was born at this point?
No, I don't. Yeah, Jamie was born.
So you have 2 kids?
2 kids. Robbie was homeschooling. I say Robbie, not me, because she was the one who did all the work. And so I just had to figure it out, But I was ready to retire at that point. I loved the job I had at the college. I loved the cadets. The cadets are great. They, it was a big learning curve for me, but what I enjoyed most was just watching them develop over the 4 years from a freshman to a senior and to become a lieutenant. That was huge. And I really did enjoy that. It was very rewarding to do that. But it was time for me to move on. I knew it was 38 and I needed to figure something out, So it was very fearful. I was very fearful of retiring because not knowing what I was going to do to make money.
Yeah, because especially when Robbie's homeschooling.
Yeah, and no college degree,
No college degree.
no
Only,
skill set.
Well, you have skill sets, but it's not a
really
piece of paper.
Not really for the civilian world.
Not for the civilian world. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. You can't go, hey, I know how to shoot guns and jump out of airplanes. What job does that get me? So you're in this critical point once again. You're talking about when you're 22 and now you're 38. So it's another critical point of, I know I feel called to retire, to hang up this military, which is hard because it's part of your identity. It's part of who you are. It's where you've been. Okay, you've made that commitment that you have to go do something else. Did you invite God into that equation? Like, what did you do? Like, hey, God, do I just toss a career coin?
No. It was it was a very prayerful moment. I mean, I didn't feel like there was any question about if I needed to retire. I was ready to retire. I felt comfortable with that. The question was, what do you do?
Yeah.
That was the big question. So I felt pretty good about it because I had a job to go into right away. Me and a couple other guys, we helped start up a wilderness program for troubled kids. And I felt like, oh, that's going to be a great job. I'm going to love that. And I did like being in the woods because I like being in the woods. But I didn't like chasing bad kids through the woods. So,
Yeah.
so then I had to figure, okay, this is not going to work out. I need to do something else. So then after a year of doing that, going back to the college, there's an active duty component and a retired component. So the retired component colonel, who was the commandant of cadets, called me and said, hey, I'm expanding my staff. I have a position opening, operations officer. Want to know if you were interested in it. And I was like, oh, yes, I am. So
Yes.
I was fortunate enough to get that. So then I became a state employee.
Which gives you part of that retirement
So
program.
I'm back to the college wearing a uniform, but I'm a state employee. I'm retired.
Yeah.
And so I'm working with the same people I've worked with.
Do they still call you like master or sergeant? Like, are they allowed to call you that in a retired role?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was an easy transition for me, and I enjoyed that a lot because I'm back with the cadets. I'm back where I'm comfortable.
Was it weird being the retired
No
part
not really.
versus the active part?
No.
Okay.
No,
I didn't know.
I didn't feel weird at all. I enjoyed doing what I was doing, but it's a state job. Didn't pay very well, and so at that point, with my military retirement and my state pay, I was still making less money than I was when I was full-time active duty. And so I was like, gosh, I got to do better than this. I didn't know. That's when I got really stumped, So at that point, I was meeting with a small group with a couple of men. And I mean, I agonized over for months what I was going to do, and just talk to these guys. They prayed with me.
And how young are the kids right now?
Caleb would have been 6. Is he 95? 6. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe 7. So
6 or
Jandy
7.
would have been about 4.
Okay, and Robbie's still homeschooling. So
Right.
So yeah, I asked that because you got young kids. You're trying to provide for the family, and you are providing as a dad. They probably love you as a dad, but you're coming from the financial standpoint of I'm actually making less money than I was, and that's stressful.
It is very stressful.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure,
Yeah.
and so you're agonizing with a small group. What happens?
Well, they helped me. I mean, we prayed about it for months. I know, easily months. The decision of what to do, and so the decision was that I was going to leave the college and become a real estate appraiser because you could do that, and then I was going to get my real estate license and do real estate because I'm not really sure how that. I know how the appraiser came a part of the equation because the active duty colonel that was there, that's what he did. And he came in one time and started talking about how he enjoyed it and this, that. And I thought, well, I can do that, So I got my appraiser license. I got my real estate license.
That's what Caleb got first too. Was his appraiser license, wasn't it? Yeah.
And then I made the jump, and that was a very, very God moment, a very scary moment for me. I distinctly remember having a conversation with Robbie in the kitchen and said, you need to get your teacher certificate current and make sure it's good because if this doesn't work out, you're going to have to go to work.
Yeah.
And she just looked at me and she said, well, I'm not worried about it. And I was like, well, I am. She's like, you'll do great. And I was like,
Now, was this Chestatee or was this like, did you have to work somewhere else?
So I just got I was appraising first.
Oh, okay.
And then after I started appraising, the real estate business just kicked off. I was working for a company called Prudential at that time. And then I went to go work for Remax.
Remax, okay.
Yeah. And
was there some things that you were learning? Like, was it easy when you first started?
The whole thing is learning curve, yeah.
Okay.
The whole thing.
I was wondering if it was like, all right, I kind of get this a little bit, or was it like I'm struggling right now? I don't know what.
Well,
any of
God
this
was
stuff
good.
means.
God was very good because I hit the ground. The biggest part was, we didn't have a whole lot of savings. We didn't have hardly anything. And it was like, now you're working off commission. You're not working off of, like a military paycheck the 1st and the 15th. So
Yeah.
it's a whole new world, So very, very scary for me. Because from the time I was 18 till now, 1st and the 15th, Tony got a paycheck, so it was different. So, but God was good. My business was good, and I got really busy really fast. So I stopped doing the appraising and focused more on the real estate, and I just stayed in the real estate. That would have been 2001. That would have been 2003.
Okay.
When I started doing that, and then did that for a few years, and thought, I think I can open my own company. I think I can do this. And so then I got my broker's license.
Can I ask you this question just real quick? I'm going to go back. You retired from the active duty in 2001, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what time it was? August. So you retired a month before 9/11 happened?
I retired 11 days before 9/11. Yeah, August 31st was my last day.
Wow. Because I was just thinking to myself, like, I didn't know if that was a weird, like, if you retired after 9/11, if you felt like, well, maybe do I need to go back into it?
Yeah, that was a weird feeling when that happened, for sure.
Because you've been through 2 combat missions with the Rangers, and now we're like the whole country just had this huge thing happen to them. I didn't know if that was any questions about that. You're like, that's the next generation.
Yeah, it was a weird feeling for sure.
I got you. Sorry, I didn't mean to go
No,
back
good.
in time,
You're
but I
good.
just thought about that. So 2003, you got you're starting the real estate and start selling houses more so than the appraising.
Yeah.
And then you do that for how long?
I just continued to do it, and then I believe I went on my own. I opened up Chestatee Property Management first, which I think was 2007.
Was that another God moment of like,
Yeah.
I have the, because if people don't understand the real estate world, from what I understand, you have to have a broker. It's probably a little safer to have someone else be the broker. You work for the company. Okay, I still get commission, but I have this safety. If they have leads, they can give it to me. But to go out on your own is a whole nother like.
It was. Yeah, that was a big step, but I felt like I could do it. And I started it with the property management side, managing rental properties and selling. And then a year later, I opened up, I formed Chestatee Real Estate, and then I made a phone call to my partner now and asked him if he wanted to come on board, as a partner. And he did. And then we just have been doing it ever since 2008.
That partner who's also a big part of my life. Love you. So that they've been there since 2008.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And y'all have expanded. Even the company's expanded, right? Because didn't y'all buy like you started off just working in a small little building, didn't you? And
No, we've been in the same place. We rented it, but then we ended up buying it.
Yeah.
And our agents obviously grew. We grew agents. We're very comfortable where we are now. We have a really good office.
Was there any military things that you learned that you do with leading? Like, do you lead the other real estate people, or do they just kind of self-manage?
Yeah, no, they're independent contractors. They kind of do their own thing.
Oh, okay.
But it's everybody brings something different to the table. From that aspect of leadership, and what I would say I carried over to my clients that I sell stuff to, or to my owners, is the military thing is you take care of your soldiers, they'll take care of you, and it's the same aspect. You take care of your people, they'll take care of you. Whether you're going to get anything out of it or not, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You might be showing houses to somebody, or you might be helping somebody do something and knowing you're not going to get anything out of it, but it's the right thing to do. So you take care of people, they'll take care of you.
That's it's very similar to your partner would always tell me that was is his ministry field, because there's a lot of times where, there's first time homeowners or it's complicated.
That's right.
They don't understand this. And I'm not here to take advantage and get rich quick. I'm here to walk life with them, help them out, answer questions, and then obviously there's some customers who are just jerks, that probably drive y'all crazy. We can do another hour of real estate crazy stories that you probably went through. But for the most part, you're walking with these people and you're pouring into them and it makes them feel comfortable, makes them feel safe. And, there is reputations out there of like car salesmen and real estate people trying to get rich quick. And so that's not what we're about here. We're about walking with our people because we value people over a profit. And so I think that has been a successful, mission or life goal that y'all have. Because I see that the way that you interact with people all the time. And so one day are you going to have to retire from the real estate, or can you do that forever?
You can do it for a long time. It depends on how busy you want to be.
Yeah, because now you kind of expanded into the cow business.
I wouldn't say I'm in the cow business. But
He's a cattle rancher, people.
I do have cows.
Do you have cows? Is that more of a hobby type thing?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. CJ Farms. Follow them on Instagram. They're fantastic. Just CJ Farms. I feel like I'll tag it in the post because they're fantastic. How many cows you got?
I keep the same amount of mama cows, and then I have 10 mama cows, and they generally will always have a calf on the ground, and then I have a bull, so if you count them all, there's about 21. Sometimes there might be it depends on the situation. You might have a few more, you might have a few less.
Do you remember when I saved your farm?
When you saved my farm?
And see, this is the type of thing.
When the gate was open?
When the gate was open, Tony Nunley sometimes doesn't remember how valuable I am to CJ Farms. I was going to your neighbor's house, and I noticed the gate was open. And I was like, that's weird, because there's cows in the field. But I was like, well, maybe he's there. And so I pull up, and then they have for those who don't know, they're kind of upper on the hill. And I was letting the dogs out, and I look, I'm like, there's no trucks over there. Like, there's nobody over there. And the gate's open. The cows were they weren't like they weren't about to get out. But I remember calling you. You're like, hey, what's up, Ben? I was like, is this gate supposed to be open? And you're like, what gate? I was like, to your farm? And so you're like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Like, you really came over and was like, I don't know why my gate was open.
Yeah, who knows?
But now you have like a high tech, it's like a
automatic gate opener.
Yeah, computer operated cyborg thing that opens it. So, well, Tony, first of all, thank you for being here today. And this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode. I'm going to probably break it up to different parts.
Probably could cut out most of it.
No. I'm not cutting out anything. This is fantastic. But we like to end each episode. And if I do break this into part 1, part 2, maybe even part 3, I don't know. This is only going to be in the last part. But we like to do called Nuggets of Wisdom. We like to end each episode with just something that people can take away to think about, to chew on, to ponder, that maybe is something that a life lesson that you've experienced. And I feel like we've learned a lot of nuggets of wisdom, but what's something that you kind of, I don't know, like to use as a nugget of wisdom to keep you moving forward?
Oh, man, I don't know. I'm not that smart.
Because I know the one that you said to me that I'm going to probably name the first episode is learning how to bend and not break. Because I think there's a lot of times in our life where, I don't know that's a military term, but I'm using it more of a civilian way, is there are moments in our life where we are bending. But when we have faith in God and we lean into who God is and who God's called us to be as a follower, as a person who experiences grace and love and joy from God, is let's not break. We're going to go through a lot, but when we're God, we're not going to break because we can't break, because God can't break. Or if we do break, we seek God for that healing and that restoration. But I like that. I like how we learn more about who we are and that we can bend, but let's not break. I don't know. I like that.
I don't know. I don't think I'm smart enough to have words of wisdom. You know, I think.
Oh my gosh.
I think of a lot of. Excuse me. I think. You know, I have a different. I'm pretty laid back for the most part. I stay pretty laid back, and I try not to get upset over things that. I'm more of a problem solver.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to overreact to a situation. If there's a situation that comes up, I immediately go into how to fix the problem. Not really why it happened, whose fault it is, but let's fix the problem. And I think sometimes we're really quick to blame, you know, and life is short. We all say that all the time, but it's so true. Life is short, and now I'm about to be 60 next week. It gets shorter all the time.
Happy birthday.
But I think sometimes we have to not take things so seriously and enjoy more of the little things, you know. And I don't think there's any wisdom to that. There's nothing earth shattering. People have been saying that for years, but I think maybe you don't really see that till you're a little older. But if you can pick it up sooner, you probably will have a more enjoyable life.
Yeah. Tony, let me ask you this. I know I always say, let me ask you this, but I'm hosting a podcast and it's my job to ask questions, but it's a word or a little phrase that I always say. So let me ask you this. You talked about, you know, because we do a lot of spiritual stuff on this podcast, and the great white buffalo, in case you didn't know, like in Native American culture, it represents a spirituality. Not a lot of people know that. And so that's kind of why we kind of went with that theme. And so with the military being kind of your career, you're really good into it, but there are stuff that you are passionate about outside of the military and things that help you connect with people outside of the what y'all call the civilian world, right? I think is that the military term, the civilian world. So what were some of the things that I know we talked about earlier on in the podcast? You talked about summer camps, which I thought was cool because Caleb and I worked at Canuga. Shout out to Canuga fam. What's up? And so we had that summer camp. You worked at summer camp and talked about, was it deaf and hearing impaired? I think that's the correct terminology. Where was that in? Like, where did you work outside of like the military?
Well, I grew up, like I said, I grew up in a church that had a big deaf crowd and my age kids. So it was kind of a natural process to get involved. And then I just, for whatever reason, I had a heart for it. I had a soft spot for it. And then I would volunteer at the elementary school to the special ed classes. I'd go in and kind of sit with a child of profound problems, basically. And I just enjoyed doing that. So I kind of always, for whatever reason, if I was going to head any direction educational wise, that's kind of an area I thought I would be as a special ed teacher. Because I was really enjoying that. But I worked it was called Camp Anchor, actually, out of North Carolina. And I would spend the summers down there, and that was a joy. I just enjoyed doing it. I didn't mind giving up my summers doing it. You know, there was no pay or anything. You just were down there. And I really had a passion for the kids. And the problem with that was, you know, there's not a deaf community in the Army. You know,
Right.
So you lose a skill set. You lose the fluency of it. So I didn't have an opportunity very much to use that in the military because it's just not around until I was in Alaska. And now when I was in Alaska, the time was easier to get. I had more free time and availability to work.
Right. Because you're not in special operations either at that point.
So I was able to locate a local community and took some classes while I was up there in sign language because I just wanted to see where I was, you know. So I took some advanced classes in sign language and then worked with the local deaf community.
Well, let me ask you this, though. So you're saying from when the summer camps that you worked at was before military.
Yes.
And
high school.
In high school at Camp Anchor. And then almost, this is, oh my God, more 20 years, right? Or no, this is more 10 years, 13, 14 years later that you're in Alaska, from that point, did you just like, but that stayed consistent, you're passionate about it? Or did you kind of like, you're in Alaska and you know, I could kind of dabble back into it. You're like, oh, this is really cool. I really want to get back into this.
Well, I didn't.
Does that make sense?
I never had an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a realist and practical, and so I'm not going to be able to do anything with deaf children while I'm in the Rangers. That's just not going to.
Yeah.
That's not an option. So there's no sense in fretting over it. And I didn't think I would have another opportunity. But when I was in Alaska, I was availed the opportunity to go to school, and at that point I was more like, where's your skill? I mean, we don't even know what's going on the last 10 years, you know. So
Yeah.
I got back into the classroom and did some things in the classroom to sharpen up my skills, and I was working with the local community, which I really enjoyed a lot.
I think that's what I was trying to get at, was just, to me, it's powerful is the word I'm thinking, or moving, that you had such a passion that went through such a long season of 12 years of not being super active to it still being a passion. Like most times people kind of go through phases of like, oh, that was cool, I liked it for summer. But you're like, no, it lasted a long time. And I think that's because at some point it hit a deep heartstring. And I think this is a beautiful moment.
Is definitely a soft spot. You know, we didn't talk about this, but I'm not your average Ranger. And when I say that, I'm not
No,
saying...
you're not. You're the best.
I'm not saying that boastfully. I'm saying that I don't fit the profile of most... There's some things that I do fit the profile of, but there's a lot of things that I don't. Like when I joined the Rangers, I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I wasn't a troublemaker. Didn't have any tattoos, you know. And a lot of guys in the Ranger unit were at least one of those. Dipped, smoked.
If not all three, yeah.
Drank a lot.
Triple threat over here.
You know, all that. And I wasn't, you know. I would go to church still. Hardly anybody was going to church from the Ranger unit, you know.
Was that instilled from your childhood? Like,
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I distinctly remember during training one time when I was pretty young into the unit, and we were doing some rappelling exercises, and I got into the top of this high place and was going over the edge, and the instructor stopped me, and I would never forget it. And he stopped me, and he says, "Ranger Nunley, why would anybody that worked with deaf children, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, want to be a Ranger?" And I don't even know what I told him. I just know I was afraid to death. But what I do remember later was somebody had noticed that, you know, so I definitely was standing out for some reason or another, you know. So it's not that in that aspect, I'm not normal. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not your typical.
Well, and you didn't give in to peer pressure either, because I bet there was moments on the weekend where everybody wants to go to the bar, and you may go for like just to socialize, but not to drink and not to do those things. And sometimes if you don't play it right, it can make you an outcast of like, oh, he's not one of us. He just want to hang out with us. But it's cool that they noticed that and commended you of like, all right, you know, you're gonna do you. I think that speaks a lot to your character.
But I probably am normal as far as my size. You know, your average. You know, it's interesting. You know, I've said this many times, but a lot of your Rangers aren't tall people. You know, and it's not the guys that you think. They're not the guys that you think they would be. You know, sometimes it's the most skinny guy in the group that has the biggest heart. You know, but carries the same amount of weight, does the same amount of work as everybody else, but it's got the big heart.
I got you, and that's awesome. So when you were in Alaska, you got plugged in and worked with the group. What city were y'all close to in Alaska?
We were in Anchorage.
In Anchorage, okay. Because when you think Alaska, I'm like, are they in the middle of like a frozen tundra? But no, y'all are like near a city.
And that, you know, that passion was very important to me, because when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I retired, going back to that conversation, one of my main options that I was giving myself was to become an interpreter, a sign language interpreter.
Oh, okay.
So when I got to the college where I had some more time, I enrolled in some more classes, and I basically at this point had gotten to the point to where I took all the classes I could take. There was no more level of classes to take. The next step would have been to enter into the interpreting program, which is a big step. And in order to do that, I basically probably would have had to have left my job, because you really have to immerse yourself into the community for a while to get the skills you need to do it. So I kind of sat on that fence for a while. I actually helped a local interpreter do a couple of graduations at the college for a deaf student. I worked in the middle school a few times when the interpreter was out, so I was getting my feet wet, but I really wasn't doing it. And I just didn't feel like I could, because it was just too big of a risk to leave employment for a while, because we didn't have the savings to support that.
Right. But I think it's still awesome that you just have such a heart for that has lasted from your teenage years till now. You just said you're about to turn 60, and it's still a passion of yours that it still hits that heart. Did your mom was from France, right? She's
Right.
like 1,000, like 100% French.
Yeah, she was.
Did she teach you French?
No, that was sad that she didn't.
Okay, so I was gonna say, because you could be trilingual, American Sign Language,
Yeah,
English, and French.
Unfortunately, she came to the States not speaking a word of English with my dad. Military, he was in the military in France, and she was here during the part of the United States when it was not accepted really to speak other languages other than English. So she really felt the pressure to learn English, and so
And kind of suppress her.
yeah. So she did not speak French after she learned English. I wish she had taught us French.
Yeah.
I wish she would have spoken at the house. That would have been a great benefit.
Did she even to herself? You never caught her speaking French, maybe?
What, to her family on the phone?
On the phone? Okay.
To my dad sometimes around Christmas, if they're trying to keep a secret or something.
Could he speak French?
He could. He,
Okay.
even though he was not educated, he could speak Spanish and French.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So he was trilingual.
Yeah, he picked that up pretty good, because he was stationed in Panama for many years. So
Okay.
he picked up there, and then he was stationed in France. He picked up French.
Bonjour.
Yeah,
That's what I
Mom
got.
was definitely 100%. She actually lived during the occupation of the Germans.
Wait, what? We don't have enough time to talk about this today, but I definitely need you back on the podcast to talk about. I'm a big World War II buff. And she lived through the occupation.
Yeah, I mean, she was born in 32, so she was
She was 10 years old.
10 years old when 42, but she was, I think she would have been 8 or 9 when Germans occupied France, before the Americans came.
Yeah, because I think they came in 39,
'Cause
40.
She lived in the basement of they occupied their upstairs, and
Yeah.
they were basically contained in the basement to live.
Wow. Have you been back to France with her at all?
Actually, we went a few years ago. First time that she and I had gone together with my wife Robbie. We went over there, and it was a good trip.
Was that emotional at all?
No.
Or just fun?
It was just
Okay.
fun. Yeah.
Did she talk a lot about that time?
She did not, which is interesting. Now that she's passed, I I have a million more questions for her.
I didn't realize she passed away. I apologize.
Yes, she passed away last September. At her funeral, talking to a lot of people at her church, apparently she did talk a lot about it to them, because they had mentioned it. And I don't know if she felt like she didn't want to tell us about it or what. I just know a little bit of what she's told us.
If
I know she's not a fan of Russia.
Yeah, well, because Russia wasn't innocent in the World War II either. We have a lady at our church. Her name is Miss Lois, and she's like 91 now, 92, and she was a little girl during World War II, but here in Georgia, in South Georgia, and apparently I did not know this, but they brought some prisoners over to America, and they worked in her parents' farm field, like German prisoners, and then they eventually they worked the farms, and then they went back to Germany at some point. But she talked about that, and I thought that was super interesting. Wow, because I feel like to have your home invaded and your country invaded, and there was a lot of casualties in the taking of Paris and France. And I don't know if she was in Paris or one of the off cities, but
She's on the coast.
she's on the coast. Okay, so she was probably one of the later taken over of France because they came in from that side. But it's still, I mean, that's traumatic. Your home. People,
Yeah.
soldiers live. Yeah,
Exactly.
wow. And I'm sorry I didn't realize she passed away. So, well, I appreciate you sharing that. And
Yep.
are
Thanks
are
for
you
having me.
are you doing anything with sign language right now?
I'm not.
Not yet. And that's actually what he's exclusive. He's opening up his own Nunley school for the deaf impaired. Think about it. You know what? Think about it, T-Dud. Can you do? I'm gonna put you on the spot, and if you can't, that's fine. Can you do Great White Buffalo? Like is that? I don't know if that's even a thing.
I would probably embarrass myself, but I could get it across, but I won't do it.
Okay. We won't do it. An exclusive. Maybe later we can get one. A lot. I always call it. Don't make it a level 10 when it's really not. I work with some people. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I have worked with some people who, when a situation comes, is a level 10 freak out. And it's like, let's take a deep breath. It's not level 10.
But probably
No one's bleeding.
I would say my best advice to people is to marry up.
Marry up.
Yeah. I married way up. So
Shout out to Arnon. Well, Tony, thank you for being here. First sergeant, master sergeant. I don't know which one. I guess you retired as a master sergeant, right? Which one do I call you? Tony. I was gonna salute you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here today on the Great
Thanks
White
for having
Buffalo
me.
podcast.
Yeah, this was enjoyable.
And you get to see the World Series Braves. We got to watch that. I didn't know if I was going to experience that. I just was looking at my championship ring. You're a big Braves fan, but I appreciate you being here. You're the best. You've been a blessing to my life, and Caleb and Jamie and Robbie, the whole Nunley family, has been a blessing. So I appreciate you being here today.
Thanks, Ben.
I want to say, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. We appreciate y'all liking the videos, watching the videos. If you're an Apple or Spotify listener or Amazon, we're on Amazon Music. I always forget that, but we're on Amazon Music for those who listen there. We really appreciate y'all listening and supporting the podcast. This is just a passion project of ours, and so I appreciate y'all doing that and being part of this. But until next time, peace.